This fool actually believed he could measure the absolute beast towering right in front of him. Satoshi was desperate to find out if he possessed the raw spark to become a true cultivator, so he threw down the gauntlet and challenged Makoto. But Makoto had already dropped a massive warning. Stepping up to him wasn't an exam. It was a one-way ticket to eating dirt. Making matters worse, Yosuke and Koya jumped into the fray, totally convinced that a 3-on-1 beatdown would level the playing field. But that was their first fatal error. Yosuke charged in blind, acting like he was about to speedrun the entire brawl. Makoto snatched him out of midair before the guy could even blink instantly, using his body to literally mop the concrete like a busted broom. Without missing a beat, Satoshi and Koya launched a synchronized assault. One dropped from the sky while the other swept in low for a brutal ground strike. But Makoto casually deflected both hits like he had memorized their entire playbook. He snatched Koya up like a limp rag doll, violently smashing him straight into and punted the duo away like a totally worthless side mission. Surging with terrifying dark energy. Scrambling back to their feet, the bruised trio cooked up a desperate new strat. This time they swarmed him, launching an all-out blitz from every conceivable blind spot. Yet Makoto merely tapped his heel against the ground. He proceeded to rearrange Yosuke's stomach with a crushing gut punch before giving Koya's jaw some extremely aggressive chiropractic realignment. Running on absolute fumes, Satoshi poured every last drop of his energy into one final desperate haymaker. But as the heavy smoke finally faded away, Makoto stood there, completely untouched. The most humiliating part: the entire massacre wrapped up in under 2 minutes, and Makoto hadn't even shifted an inch from where he originally stood. At that exact second, it brutally clicked in Satoshi's brain. The massive gap between their power levels wasn't just raw talent. It was a bottomless... You see, the secret behind this overwhelming strength is that our main guy, Makoto Yamori, used to be the absolute supreme cultivator of the Luwei continent. He single-handedly pulled humanity back from the brink of extinction by utterly crushing the Demon King's demonic legions during the terrifying Dark Ages. But the moment the dust settled on his glorious victory, his highly trusted brothers-in-arms violently stabbed him right in the back. Bleeding out and drawing his final breath, but right as his vision faded to black, fate flipped the script. Makoto snapped awake, completely reincarnated in a modern parallel universe, as an supposedly born into the ultra-wealthy, highly respected Yamori dynasty. There was just one massive catch. The Makoto of this modern era was incredibly frail, utterly powerless, and had already been tossed to the curb by his own bloodline. Blinking against the harsh light, Makoto peels his eyes open, only to find a massive crowd of students staring down at him like he was while his brain scrambles to process this weird new reality. Some random jerk barks an insult, mocking him as a useless loser for passing out cold during a basic physical exam. Another snobby classmate eagerly jumps in, loudly reminding everyone that the pathetic guy on the floor got permanently disowned by his own wealthy relatives, absolutely stripping him of any right to be called a young master. Just a few feet away, a preppy blonde girl tugs at the sleeve of the academy's top prodigy, Kitama, desperately begging him to get back to the trials. She practically squeals, flashing an arrogant smirk. Kitama smoothly nods, and the popular duo struts off together. Totally clapping his hands, the irritated instructor angrily orders the massive crowd of gawking students to fall back in line and finish up their as the noisy crowd scatters, leaving Makoto abandoned on the dirt. A violent tsunami of foreign memories suddenly crashes hard into his brain. Gasping for air, the terrifying truth hits him. He genuinely woke up. This alternate version of Makoto suffers from a devastatingly fragile physique, entirely ruined by that severe weakness combined with the tragic death of his parents gave his ruthless clan the perfect excuse to kick him out. Scrolling through this our ancient warrior realizes something insane. Not a single soul on this modern planet knows a damn thing about martial cultivation. Taking a deep, calculating breath, Makoto instantly back in his bloody past life. The legendary masters of the Luyao realm spent centuries perfecting the exact art of absorbing that raw. Shutting his eyes, the reincarnated master fiercely sharpens his focus, desperately scanning the area, though he only manages to pick up completely unfazed by the terrible conditions. He begins the incredibly dangerous process of aggressively armed with centuries of godly martial arts wisdom. He flawlessly executes the breathing techniques effortlessly, pulling the wild chi into his functioning on pure warrior instinct. He locks that precious energy deep inside his spiritual center, intending to forcefully forge his weak within mere moments. That tiny spark of newly generated power surges through his crippled system, violently shattering the blockages in his ruined meridians. And sizing up his new reflection, Makoto realized a fierce resolve ignites in his chest as he swears to claw his way back to absolute power and step foot on the Luye continent once more, to slaughter every last traitor who stabbed him in the back. But his bloody vengeance that has to be put on ice for a minute. Right now, he is barely scraping the absolute bottom tier of the first cultivation stage, climbing back to his rightful throne as the undisputed apex predator of the realm, needing to test drive this fragile new shell and gauge exactly where his stats stand. Makoto crashes the Academy's fitness assessment. He marches straight out to the track, casually declaring his entry to the stunned instructors. The bleachers instantly erupt into vicious jeers, roasting him for daring to steal the spotlight from Kitamura. You see, Kitamura is the golden boy of the campus, a track prodigy clutching a golden ticket to an elite sports university. Basking in the hype, Kitamura joins the dog pile, spitting on Makoto and labeling him utterly spineless trash. Makoto just brushes off the static. He knows perfectly well his newfound power absolutely eclipses any pathetic mortal limits. Some random extra barks out that the entire roster forfeited just to avoid getting humiliated by the track star. Moments later, the heavyweights step onto the sun-baked asphalt, locking into their lanes for the ultimate showdown. Crack! The starting pistol echoes, and Kitamura blasts off the block like a bullet. Meanwhile, Makoto just stands there lazily counting out loud to bless this so-called Wonder Boy with a massive handicap. The sidelines explode into a chorus of brutal laughter, completely writing Makoto off as a delusional loser. 1, 2, 3 seconds tick by. Suddenly, Makoto lunges forward, instantly obliterating everyone's expectations. In the blink of an eye, he blurs right past the golden boy, leaving a trail of dust like an absolute speed demon. Here is the thing: when cultivators originally descended upon the Luye continent, they completely shattered the ceiling of human biology. Makoto pulls a massive flex. He slams on the brakes right before the tape. Turning his back, he starts counting down a second time, casually waiting for his panting rival to close the gap. He gifts Kitamura 3 whole seconds of false hope before finally stepping over the finish line. The coach stares blankly at the stopwatch. Makoto just obliterated the campus record, clocking in at roughly 9 seconds flat. Kitamura heavily crosses the mark, his eyes wide in absolute horror as the reality of losing to the school's punching bag sets in. Even though his core remains leagues away from its prime, Makoto smirks, deeply satisfied with this baseline strength. Armed with a clean slate, he silently promises to violently shatter the heavens and crush any. In his past life dominating the Luye continent, Makoto stood alone at the absolute pinnacle, spending 50 grueling years cultivating his soul. Breaking through to the 7th stage by the age of 65, he solidified his terrifying reputation as the realm's supreme deity. But now trapped inside this pathetic, fragile meat suit, he desperately needs to secure high-tier alchemy pills to fast-track his spiritual awakening. Glancing at the local market prices, he nearly chokes. The required herbs cost an astronomical fortune, and the previous owner of this miserable box. He considers crafting mystical talismans to flip for cash, but his wallet is too thin to even buy the lowest grade ink. Refusing to let poverty derail his bloody path of vengeance, he aggressively racks. Right as he starts plotting a financial comeback, the track star Kitamura corners him. The sore loser brings his posse to barricade the restroom doors. Backing him up is Haru, the heavyweight captain of the boxing club. Kitamura sneers, demanding an early cut of their usual protection fee as a penalty for the humiliating stunt pulled on the track. Digging through inherited memories, Makoto realizes this gang of punks mercilessly milked the old host for every dime he had. Just last week, Kitamura Hota and Akira ambushed the poor kid, violently shaking him down, all cleverly disguised as a mandatory tax for keeping him. Catching Makoto's dead-eyed stare, a cold sweat breaks out on Kitamana's, and he instantly nudges Haru to handle the situation. The cocky brute cracks his knuckle, fully expecting to flatline the usual loser with a single haymaker. He launches a vicious right hook, but Makoto just slips right past the fist like a ghost. The old him would have been eating floor right now, but for this reborn predator, it is absolute child's play. Pivoting sharply, he sinks a devastating counterpunch straight into Haru's jaw, instantly rearranging his facial structure. Without missing a beat, Makoto pivots and punts Akira across the room like a sack of garbage. Hota and Kitama freeze in pure horror, staring wide-eyed at the bloodbath. There is no way this absolute monster is the same pathetic punching bag. Makoto shoots them a freezing side glare. "What's wrong, scared now?" he taunts coldly. Driven by sheer panic, the remaining duo blindly charge at him. But his hands shoot out like lightning, clamping down on their forearms, and halting their desperate assault dead in its tracks. With a sickening crunch, he mercilessly snaps their bones, sending them both dropping to their knees in agonizing, high-pitched shrieks. He completely zones out, there wailing a dark, satisfied smirk creeping across his face as he drinks in. Tears streaming down their faces, the two bullies sob hysterically, begging for mercy. Bored with the torture, Makoto simply lets go, tossing their limp bodies into the corner, like wet rags. Kitama is shivering violently, practically kissing the floor as he stammers out pathetic apologies. Makoto decides he has had enough fun. But the second he turns his back, Haru blindly lunges forward for a sneak attack. Big mistake. Makoto whips around and buries his fist straight into the bully's face, instantly shattering whatever bones were left intact. "Try that again, and I'll put you in the ground," he growls. Witnessing this absolute massacre, the rest of the gang practically soil themselves, completely paralyzed by his suffocating, demonic aura. "Empty your pockets. Every last cent you stole from me," he demands. When they just blink in dumb confusion, he barks the order again, echoing off the walls. Yelping in pure terror, Kitama wildly nods, swearing to pay it all back. Fumbling with trembling fingers, he yanks out a thick stack of bills and bows at a perfect right angle, offering the tribute. Snatching his rightful money, our protagonist strolls out of the restroom, briefly wondering if these punks will go crying to the teachers. But considering how traumatized they look, he bets they wouldn't dare breathe a word to a living soul. Walking down the hall, Makoto makes a firm choice. It is time to drop out. Sitting in a classroom is just a massive waste of time when he has a dark empire to build. Flipping through the stolen cash, a grin flashes across his face. It is just enough capital to score some basic, low-tier magical materials. He plans to flip enchanted talismans on the market, funding his ultimate path to blood. Wasting no time, he hits up the local markets, gathers his supplies, and sets up his very first crafting station. In the world of cultivation, these enchanted slips of paper are the bread and butter for rookie martial artists. By channeling raw, spiritual energy directly into the ink, the creator can lock mystical powers right into the parchment. Despite being stuck at stage 1 of chi refining, his past life's experience kicks in. His hands blur effortlessly, pumping out a massive stack of beginner-tier spells. The strategy is simple. Liquidate the inventory, then hunt down a spiritual hotspot to grow rare magical herbs. But reality hits hard. 3 full weeks go by, and our guy hasn't moved a single piece of inventory. He is basically squatting on a grimy street corner like a beggar, while pedestrians shoot him dirty, judgmental glares. Needing to clear his head, he takes a morning jog, only to stumble upon a badly mangled, bleeding puppy on the pavement. Seeing a perfect test subject, he slaps a healing talisman right onto its fur. In a flash of light, the fatal wounds stitch themselves closed, leaving the pup good as new. The little guy wags his tail playfully, yapping at his savior. But the wholesome moment shatters when the dog starts growling at 2 loud, arguing teenagers walking up. First is the arrogant, wealthy heir of the Wada clan, walking alongside Shizuru, the beautiful golden child of the powerful Suga family. The 2 elites are bickering non-stop, desperately scanning the streets for a missing pet. Turns out they witnessed the poor animal get hit by a car earlier. But the cold-hearted Sho couldn't care less if the mutt bled out in the gutter. Shizuru, however, is on the verge of tears, furiously demanding they track it down and rush it to a vet. Her shouting abruptly stops. Her eyes lock on to the perfectly healthy puppy resting safely in Makoto's arms, and without a second thought, she sprints straight toward him. She stares in sheer disbelief. How is this dog perfectly fine when it was dripping with blood? Catching a quick glimpse of her stuffed bag, Makoto pieces the puzzle together. They are definitely heading to the hospital for a visit. Seizing the perfect opening, he confidently flashes the exact same paper charm. He launches into his smooth sales pitch, but Sho immediately snaps aggressively, labeling him a total street corner fraud. Tuning out Shu's frantic protests, Shizuru locks desperate eyes with Makoto. Her voice trembles as she asks the burning question. Could this magic awaken someone from a deep coma? Without missing a single beat, Makoto whips out a spirit-cleansing charm, custom-crafted for massive cellular repair and rapid regeneration. He smoothly guarantees that it works absolute wonders for bedridden patients trapped in that exact nightmare. Scoffing at the blatant lie, Sho practically begs Shizuru to walk away. But she completely shuts him out once more. Stepping closer, the merchant breaks down the exact activation method. He instructs her to merely hover the glowing paper, the price tag, a steep 400,000 yen for the premium large-sized runes. Meanwhile, the pocket-sized versions will set her back 200,000 yen apiece, dropping absolutely everyone's jaws. Blinded by pure rage, Sho violently charges at Makoto, screaming at the scammer to get lost. But before a single punch even connects, Makoto instantly snatches Sho's wrist, ruthlessly twisting it until the bone pops, and coldly orders him to back the hell. Thrashing wildly, the bodyguard remains hopelessly trapped in a vice-like grip. After letting him squirm, Makoto casually tosses the brute aside like garbage, and smoothly pivots back to his wealthy client. With the massive payout finally secured, he details the lethal arsenal she just purchased. The glowing yellow paper, that is an impenetrable shield against physical, and the crimson one, a deadly explosive fireball spell. Before vanishing into the streets, Makoto sincerely hopes she never finds herself desperate enough to actually trigger those combat runes. Eyes sparkling with newfound hope, Shizuru cheerfully thanks her savior, begging to know his identity. Tossing his name over his shoulder, Makoto strolls off into the distance. Scrambling back to his feet, a bruised Sho instantly resumes whining, brutally scolding Shizuru for falling for such a pathetic street hustle. Even though part of her knows his harsh logic makes perfect sense, Shizuru fiercely clings to that microscopic sliver of hope that this enchanted paper could actually jolt her beloved mother out of her endless slumber. Meanwhile, Makoto finally arrives back at his neighborhood. A smug, triumphant grin stretches across his face as he revels in his completely sold-out Armed with a massive stack of fresh cash, he can finally ditch the streets and secure a proper headquarters. But first on his agenda, foraging for rare medicinal weeds to farm. His mission derails, however, when the pup suddenly starts barking wildly at a towering mansion. Peering through the iron gates, Makoto's eyes widen as he realizes the entire estate is suffocating under a massive, swirling Squinting into the overgrown yard, he strikes absolute gold. A patch of ultra-rare silver heart grass. Cut back to the city hospital, where Sho is currently grimacing as doctors tape up his horribly sprained wrist. Even with a nurse carefully bandaging his bruised flesh, the angry bodyguard just will not stop running his mouth. He viciously vows to completely crush Makoto the next time their paths cross. Just down the sterile hall inside her mother's silent ICU room, Shizuru is facing a brutal interrogation. Her imposing father, Kenji, the powerful councilman of Konkai City, is relentlessly tearing into her, screaming about how her pathetic... His booming, aggressive roars echo through the corridors, drawing judgmental stares and nasty whispers from the past. The nurses openly snicker behind their clipboards, mocking the rich heiress for dumping a fortune on him. Squaring her shoulders, Shizuru completely tunes out the haters, boldly declaring to her tyrant father that she would cross hell itself if it meant bringing her mom. That rebellious spark only pours gasoline on Kenji's explosive temper. He ruthlessly belittles her, calling her a delusional idiot for chasing after fairy tales and street corner voodoo. Hearing enough, Shizuru finally snaps. She screams right back at the tears streaming down her face. She pins the entire tragedy on him. His selfish delays were the exact reason her mother struck right in his guilty conscience. Kenji freezes up, completely paralyzed by the horrifying, undeniable. But Shizuru is out for blood now. She mercilessly accuses her deadbeat dad of just waiting for the flatline so he can quickly replace her mother with some. Trembling with pure, unadulterated rage, Kenji raises a heavy hand to strike her face, but freezes mid-swing. Dropping his arm in disgust, he storms toward the exit, coldly spitting out how sick. Before stepping out, he drops a devastating bombshell. A nurse is on the way to pull the plug on her mother's life support. Shizuru frantically pushes back against the grim decision. Clutching her mom's pale hand, she desperately squeezes the mysterious paper charm into her palm. Without warning, a blinding, supernatural glow erupts right out of the tiny charm. Shizuru freezes in absolute disbelief as her mother's fingers weakly brush, hovering right in the doorway. He watches as Yoko gently locks eyes with her weeping daughter. Her very first words are a tender observation about how snapping out of his daze. Kenji sprints down the hospital corridor, frantic. Bursting into the waiting area, he yells at the absolute top of his lungs, crying tears of joy as he announces to the entire ward that his wife is actually awake. A completely stunned physician and a frantic nurse scramble back into the room, hurriedly hooking Yoko up to run emergency. After reviewing the miraculous charts, the bewildered doctor delivers the unbelievable news. Yoko will be back to her normal self in under 2 years. Shizuru holds up the glowing paper, insisting the magical charm was the real cure. But the man of science firmly brushes off her crazy claim. Drawn in by the massive commotion, Sho stands frozen at the edge of the room. Still deeply trapped in a state of sheer denial, the head physician barks at his staff to immediately dial up the legendary Professor Suzuki for a second opinion. Staring at the unbelievable recovery, it finally dawns on Shu he might have been dead wrong about Makoto all along. Completely tuning out the room full of baffled skeptics, the mother and daughter collapse into a deeply emotional, tear-soaked hug. They both stare down at the handful of mystical slips, still resting. Gripping them tightly, Shizuru makes a silent, fierce vow to completely repay her mysterious savior. Meanwhile, halfway across town, Makoto finally settles right into his new creepy property. A dusty old house, practically dripping with dense, scanning his eerie new domain, a satisfied smirk creeps across his face. He is officially one step closer to clawing his way back to the Luya continent. A dark, burning fire ignites in his chest. Those worthless traitors will never see an ounce of his mercy. He knows exactly how to speed up his bloody reunion. He absolutely must break through to the 11th tier of the Chi refining realm. But to shatter that massive bottleneck, he desperately needs to track down a rare mystical spring and hoard high-tier magical ingredients. Conquering that impossible hurdle will cement his absolute dominance. Deep into the midnight hours, he sits cross-legged in the dark, violently stretching out his heightened senses. A grim reality hits him. The ambient magic of this modern realm is slowly bleeding dry. If the atmosphere goes completely hollow, his journey to supreme power, he agonizingly wonders where on earth he could possibly scavenge a potent artifact or a hidden sanctuary to smash through his crippling bottleneck. The agonizing search for pure elemental water and rare herbs was already eating him alive. But by some freak stroke of absolute luck, in the ancient world, those glowing blades are highly prized as top-tier alchemical treasures. Way beyond your average pharmacy weeds, this specific plant can actually be boiled down into a legendary elixir meant to violently boost a warrior's internal core. He firmly calculates that extracting the essence from its tiny berries into a concentrated magical pill will instantly skyrocket him into the second tier of his training. But the stakes are terrifyingly high. Even a microsecond of lost focus over the boiling cauldron could completely detonate his core and wipe out all his hard work. Refusing to let hesitation ruin his shot, he immediately locks down his mind, and by the crack of dawn the next morning he hits the gritty city sidewalks, desperate to hawk a few more of his paper charms. Because fueling a hardcore alchemy addiction in the modern world costs an absolute fortune. Keeping a super low profile, he quietly minds his own hustle on the busy street corner. Out of the corner of his eye, his sharp instincts pick up a shady... Honestly, these bottom feeders had been stalking his little pop-up shop since day 3 of his street corner business. But taking a quick head count, he realizes their pack has doubled in size this afternoon. They are definitely gearing up for an ambush. Unfazed and ready to crack some skulls, he calmly starts folding up his display mat. Right before he makes his bold move, a familiar girl marches right up to him, aggressively claiming she has been a nervous wreck ever since he vanished from their high school classes, while Makoto violently searches his fractured memories, trying to figure out who the heck she even is. The bratty girl keeps rambling, airing out all his dirty laundry, before loudly branding him a totally broke... Sifting through the host's scattered memories, Makoto finally places the girl's face. It's Mochiyama, the one person who actually defended this body's previous owner. She practically begs to loan him enough cash to get back into school, but Makoto just brushes past her, without a single word. She yells out his name, desperate for an answer, but his stone-cold silence instantly tips her off. Something is seriously wrong. Meanwhile, Makoto casually strolls down the street, mentally tallying the shadow-dwelling goons, tailing his every move. Once he hits the magic number 10, he ducks into a narrow alleyway, fully prepared to slaughter the entire... Spotting their target breaking away, the street rats aggressively swarm into the passageway, drawing their gleaming switchblades. Seconds later, they completely box him inside a grim, desolate corridor, facing a solid brick. Believing they've cornered their prey, the thugs let their guards down, cockily sneering that his little game of hide-and-seek is permanently over. To their absolute disbelief, Makoto boldly dares the whole pack to rush him simultaneously. Obviously, the punks just laugh off his suicide wish. Unfazed, Makoto demands to know why they've been stalking him like obsessed dogs for the past few... He presses them hard, trying to squeeze out the name of the mastermind, pulling their... A bald brute steps up smugly, telling the kid he managed to piss off a seriously heavy hitter. Another thug spits on the ground, questioning how a pathetic loser like Makoto ever caught the eye of the Amatani family's golden girl. The name throws Makoto off for a split second, until the foggy memories suddenly click. Setsu, the Amatani heiress who was actually engaged to the former owner, but the moment the poor guy got brutally kicked out of his own clan, she mercilessly tossed him aside and shattered their marriage pact like cheap glass. The logic completely baffles Makoto. Why go through the trouble of silencing a discarded fiancé when the engagement is already ancient history? Realizing these scumbags won't spill the truth nicely, he decides it's time to extract the answers through extreme physical trauma. Lurking in the shadows nearby, Mochiyama watches the nightmare unfold, completely horrified that Makoto is terrified that a frail student like him will get butchered by these hardened mobsters. She frantically fumbles for her phone to dial the cops, but someone spots her shake. Before her thumb even touches the screen, a massive hand violently snatches her up as she kicks and screams for her life. The sudden shrieking echoes through the alley. The gang turns to see their imposing boss dangling a terrified Mochiyama by the collar, dragging her around like a helpless stray pup. Makoto's eyes widen slightly. He hadn't sensed her clumsy footsteps trailing him at all. The mafia boss bursts into malicious laughter, mocking the kid for playing the ladies' man while secretly keeping the wealthy Setsu on the hook. Completely disregarding her own life, Mochiyama hysterically screams at Makoto to run away and save himself. She bravely bluffs that her elite family background will protect her from getting hurt. The boss just throws his head back and howls at her pathetic naivety. He leans in with a psychotic grin, whispering that no one will ever find her rotting corpse in a forgotten dump like this. Deciding to butcher the witness first, he whips out a jagged blade and drives it toward her throat. But in a blinding flash, Makoto intercepts, instantly shattering the mobster's wrist with a devastating right hook before the thug's brain even processes the agonizing pain. Makoto casually palms the giant's face and ruthlessly craters his... Dead silence falls over the gang. Their jaws hit the floor. Even a trembling Mochiyama stares in pure awe, wondering if this absolute monster is truly the cowardly Makoto she once knew. Staring down the utterly paralyzed goons, Makoto cracks his knuckles and coldly repeats. Miles away, police radio chatter blares inside Officer Kaya's cruiser. The infamous Scar Gang is actively mobilizing. Dispatch reports that over 30 armed hostiles are swarming a claustrophobic alleyway down on East Street. The undercover cop on site frantically radios in, confirming the mob is hunting down a teenage boy and has just taken a young girl as collateral damage. Slamming his foot on the gas, Kaya blasts his sirens, barking orders through the comms for the officer to immediately call in heavy backup, but firmly warns him to keep Police Chief Unaga completely in the dark for now. He orders the rookie to hold his position and wait for the cavalry, strictly forbidding any solo heroics. But the patrolman's voice crackles back over the radio, stuttering that a SWAT team might actually... Swallowing hard, the cop reports that the targeted teenager just single-handedly butchered the entire syndicate without breaking a sweat. Back at the bloody crime scene, Makoto is currently tormenting the bleeding crime lord, who stares up in absolute terror, unable to process how this ruthless demon used to be the pathetic punching bag of the... Makoto grills the trembling thug, demanding to know if the Amatani or Yamori syndicate orchestrated this hit. When the punk hesitates, Makoto's fingers clamp down on his skull like a vice, giving him exactly 3 seconds to spill the truth. Agonizing pressure crushes the leader's head, making him screech and plead for mercy. "Freeze right there!" Officer Kaya's voice suddenly cuts through the alley. Makoto shoots a startled glance at the badges, baffled by their lightning-fast response. His first instinct is to bolt into the shadows, but he quickly shelves the idea, refusing to reveal his true power level. Just relaxing his iron grip, he drops the bruised boss, who gasps for air, thanking his lucky stars for the sudden police. Makoto calculates the odds. Clashing head-on with the entire justice system is a losing battle at his current stage. Kaya lets out a heavy breath, thankful the bloodshed has stopped. Yet his eyes dart around the alley. In pure disbelief, how did one scrawny kid just wipe out 30 hardened gangsters? Flashing his badge, he introduces himself as the local police sergeant. Makoto doesn't even bat an eye, completely brushing him off, while Mochiyama chimes in with a ridiculously cheerful greeting. Kaya tries to smooth things over, promising that his partner, Rokuhara, will wrap up the paperwork without a hitch. But that hollow promise only sets off Makoto's alarm bells. It hits him these cops have been watching the slaughter from the very beginning. Catching that suspicious glare, Kaya quickly adds that Rokuhara will only take their basic statements, totally turning a blind eye to the weirder details. Just then, Police Commissioner Unaga storms onto the scene. He immediately brands Makoto a violent thug and slaps him with an arrest. A wicked, nasty grin stretches across Unaga's face as he dangles the official warrant right in front of Makoto's. Mochiyama absolutely loses it, screaming that the armed mob were the ones who ambushed them. But the corrupt commissioner plays dumb, claiming he only saw Makoto beating up defenseless victims. The scarred gang boss cackles with evil glee, while an officer escorts him out. Boiling with righteous fury, Kaya gets right in Unaga's face, loudly reminding the commissioner exactly who those ruthless mobsters really are. Unaga totally blows off the outburst. He mocks the lower-ranking officer for daring to cross a second-grade chief, practically dangling a termination slip over his head. Not backing down an inch, Kaya spits out a... Rokuhara quickly grabs his partner's shoulders, desperately begging him to cool it. The angry sergeant finally stops fighting the moment Makoto casually holds out his hands, surrendering without a fight. His instincts are screaming some unseen puppet master is pulling these strings from the shadows. Unaga chuckles like a victorious villain, completely oblivious. Makoto is just playing along, stepping right into the trap to smoke out the real mastermind. He needs to crush this annoying problem fast, before it throws a wrench into his crucial cultivation training. Tilting his head, Makoto casually asks the commissioner how exactly he knew about his undercover life as a college student. Unaga flinches, instantly sweating as he realizes his arrogant mouth just leaked classified intel. Smirking, Makoto brands him a pathetic lapdog and boldly offers to wipe out Unaga's secret boss for him. The sweaty commissioner plays the innocent card, stuttering that he has absolutely no clue what mastermind he is talking about. As Unaga spins around to storm off, Makoto suddenly flicks a familiar button into the air. The chief's jaw drops, utterly terrified by how fast the kid managed to snatch it right off his uniform. While a random cop snaps the heavy cuffs onto his wrists, Makoto drops a chilling warning. Next time, he'll rip away a lot more than just a piece of plastic. Seething at the sheer disrespect, Unuga silently swears to make him pay. Meanwhile, deep inside a gloomy holding cell, a guard taps the iron bars to wake a massive inmate, giving him the green light that his fresh meat is about to walk in. The dirty cop quietly orders the terrifying thug to execute the target the second the doors close. Seconds later, the heavy steel door groans open, and Makoto is shoved straight into the lion's den. Reading the sinister smirks on the guards' faces, he instantly smells a deadly setup. But honestly, Makoto could not care less. His sharp eyes quickly lock onto the hulking hitman hired to take him out, who is lurking in the darkest corner like a predator stalking its prey. Makoto briefly ponders if this menacing stranger is the actual mastermind, pulling the strings. But before he can piece the puzzle together, the giant slowly pushes himself off the floor, launching into a bizarre monologue about divine justice and inescapable death, spewing a whole lot of self-righteous garbage. Flashing a twisted grin, he calls himself Funaki and blatantly confesses that he is cashing a massive paycheck to bury Makoto tonight, practically vibrating with sadistic joy. Funaki tells the kid to play dead and quietly accept his brutal fate. Instead, Makoto casually strolls forward without a drop of fear, flatly asking for his employer's name. From the moment the cell locked, Makoto felt a weird, heavy pressure in the air. This psycho was leaking a suffocating spiritual aura known as Ryatsu. Without wasting another breath, Funaki lunges like a freight train, completely ready to blast Makoto straight into the afterlife. Funaki's jaw practically hits the floor when his lethal strike hits absolutely nothing. Right before impact, Makoto literally before the brute can even blink, Makoto materializes right beside him, driving a devastating open palm into his chest and cratering him. Gazing down with icy calm, Makoto makes it crystal clear the only weakling in this fight is Funaki. Refusing to stay down, the bruised fighter latches onto Makoto's ankles and violently hurls him skyward. But the desperate toss barely phases our hero. Watching Makoto touch down as lightly as a feather, a chilling realization washes over Funaki. He massively miscalculated this kid's true power. Even still, his massive ego won't let him keep his mouth shut. Tuning out the arrogant trash talk, Makoto blurs forward, instantly flattening the giant with a single bone-crushing right hook. The sheer explosive force behind that hit leaves Funaki completely paralyzed with shock. Giving him zero room to breathe, Makoto launches himself high above, plummeting like a meteor to finish the job. The desperate man crosses his arms to brace for impact, but the devastating axe kick effortlessly shatters his guard. Blinded by pure rage and totally out of options, Funaki roars, charging headfirst into the meat grinder. Too bad for him, Makoto simply sidesteps the sloppy bull rush like it's absolutely nothing. He casually buries a ruthless gut punch deep into Funaki's stomach, completely crumpled on the floor. The defeated brute finally grasps the terrifying, bottomless gap in their power levels. He cowers in the dusty corner, desperately trying to process the absolute beatdown he just received. But Makoto isn't done yet. He towers over the trembling man, radiating a dark, grabbing him by the hair, he violently slams Funaki's face into the floor, coldly demanding the name of the puppet master, pulling his strings. More importantly, Makoto demands to know exactly where this street thug got his hands on that concentrated Ryatsu. Cut to Unaga pacing nervously in his lavish office, still visibly sweating bullets from his terrifying run-in with Makoto. He screams into his phone, furiously demanding to know what kind of unkillable monster the higher-ups dumped in his lap. The guy on the other end, Hashimoto, calmly brushes off, the panic swearing up and down that Makoto is just pathetic garbage kicked out by the Yamori clan. Letting out a massive sigh of relief, Unaga practically begs them to quietly wipe the kid off the map without any messy blowback. Brimming with cocky confidence, Hashimoto promises he already dispatched an elite squad of hitmen straight out of Ryuda to finish the job. To sweeten the deal, he guarantees to put in a fantastic word with Lord Ima, practically handing Unaga that shiny new district police chief badge. Greedy dollar signs flashing in his eyes, Unaga eagerly agrees, sternly warning the man not to backpedal. Back in the gloomy cell, Funaki actually proves his grit. Despite bleeding heavily from the ruthless interrogation, the The stubborn guy keeps his mouth totally shut. Honestly, Makoto kind of respects the stubborn loyalty. Coughing up blood, Funaki admits his massive mistake. He completely misjudged the kid's terrifying strength. This sudden revelation makes Makoto deeply wonder if other rogue cultivators are secretly roaming this world. Opening up Funaki details a bizarre run-in with a mysterious old monk back in Ryuta years ago. According to him, this legendary elder could easily... Before vanishing, the monk handed him a tiny vial of glowing divine water, strictly warning him to heavily water it down before drinking. By religiously sticking to that routine for years, Funaki literally mutated his ordinary body into a towering, superhuman tank. Hearing this crazy origin story, the puzzle pieces finally click. Makoto instantly recognizes this so-called miracle water as pure reiatsu, or concentrated spirit liquid. His mind races, wondering if an ultra-rare spiritual spring is hiding somewhere inside Ryuta. You see, these legendary oases only spawn in zones overflowing with After decades of intense pressure, that ambient aura liquefies into pure power, eventually pooling into these mythical hot springs, scattered across the Lua continent. Just a single tiny drop of this liquid gold is absolutely priceless, offering game-changing boosts to any serious cultivator lucky enough to find it. Breaking the silence, Makoto coldly asks why a monstrous powerhouse like him is wasting his time, playing dirty games for ordinary mortals. Breaking down the defeated giant, confesses the heartbreaking truth. He desperately needs a mountain of cash to save his sick kid who is slowly dying. He tearfully explains how he tried giving the miracle water to his boy, but it completely backfired. With the medical bills piling up, he had no choice but to sell his soul to the criminal underworld for some quick, dirty cash to keep his son alive. Staring at the broken father, Makoto quietly processes the tragic situation, before calmly offering to step in and cure the dying child himself. He breaks it down for the confused man that divine water he used is actually hypercondensed spirit liquid, otherwise known as reiatsu. While a gentle breeze of regular spiritual energy is totally harmless, this raw stuff is way too dangerous for a normal human to handle, forcing that extremely volatile energy into a fragile, sick kid's body. However, Makoto smoothly reveals that when channeled through a highly specialized technique, that same dangerous energy. To prove he isn't bluffing, he casually flashes the magical healing talisman he used to save that dying stray dog earlier, demonstrating its unbelievable. Makoto slaps the talisman right onto his chest. Funaki watches in pure shock as the glowing paper seals his gaping wounds in seconds. Draping the magic charm between his fingers, Makoto offers the bruised assassin a simple choice: drop the name of the guy pulling his strings, or get wiped off the face of the earth. Backed into a corner, Funaki spills the beans. The man signing his checks is a guy named Hashimoto. Cut to the Kozen Club. Its sleazy owner Hashimoto just clicked end on a shady phone call with Unaga. Humming a chipper tune, he swivels his chair toward a bruised, tied-up hostage, politely offering her a snack like they are at a tea party. Gagged and terrified, the poor girl can only thrash against her ropes, tears stream. Hashimoto leans in, violently prying her jaw open, before yanking out a bloody tooth with a pair of rusty shears. Her muffled screams echo through the room, while the psycho completely loses it, cackling like a mad. The twisted torture session hits pause when his stiff butler strolls in. Lord Ima is demanding an immediate update on the Makoto hit. Wiping the blood from his tools, Hashimoto smugly brushes off the concern, assuring the servant that his attack dog is already tying up loose ends. He decides to stroll down to the precinct, just to admire his handiwork, utterly convinced that Makoto is already a rotting corpse. He then orders the butler to tell Lord Ima to sit back, pop open a cold drink, and wait for the victory call. Meanwhile, down in the holding cell, the tension has finally settled. Makoto and his former assassin have struck to repay the kid for patching him up. Funaki tosses over a glowing pendant packed with raw, concentrated spirit essence. Makoto's eyes light up. Just a tiny drop of this juice on his silver grass will force the plants to sprout ripe fruit in the blink of an eye. By refining those magical crops into potent chi pills, he can skyrocket and blast straight into the second stage of cultivation. He flashes the hitman a grateful grin, but Funaki shuts down the celebration fast. He grimly warns the teenager that Hashimoto is a relentless predator who will keep hunting him. The assassin swears that nobody walks away from Hashimoto's twisted games in one piece. But Makoto Hei barely bats an eye. Smirking at the heavy warning, the teenager confidently vows to tear Hashimoto down himself. Fast forward to Neihai University. The stunning Shizuru rolls onto campus hunting for Makoto. After digging into his background, she figured out this mystery guy is actually the legendary exiled failure of the Yamori family. Driven by pure curiosity, she tracked his digital footprint straight to the college. It blows her mind that this powerhouse is just a regular third-year student. Not wasting a single second, she marches straight toward the dean's office to dig up. And in a crazy twist of fate, the head of the university happens to be Jin Mochiyama's own uncle. Behind closed doors, Mochiyama is throwing a massive fit, screaming at her uncle at the top of her lungs. She is practically begging him to pull some strings and break Makoto. But Jin is not an idiot. He aggressively shoots her down, refusing to dive headfirst into that political meat grinder. Mochiyama bites back hard. The crushing guilt is eating her alive, knowing she dragged an innocent student into a web of filthy, corrupt cops. She desperately fights to make him listen, while Kumono, a campus professor, frantically grabs her shoulders to cool her down. Kumono swears up and down that Makoto will be a free man soon. But before the dust settles, the heavy oak doors swing open, revealing Shizuru. Her piercing gaze locks onto the squabbling group as she cut back to the corrupt police precinct. Detective Kaya is practically tearing the chief's office apart, roaring at Unaga over his dirty tactics. His task force bled for years, trying to nail Scar and his vicious cartel, and now this crooked captain is just handing the gangsters a free pass, out the front door. Sipping his coffee, Unaga coldly reminds the hot-headed detective that throwing wild accusations at a commanding officer is a straight-up felony. Unfazed, Kaya slams his fists on the desk, accusing the dirty chief of cooking up something insanely foul in the shadows. But despite his righteous fury, the rookie cop to back up his explosive claims. Just as the two men lock into a lethal, dead-eyed stare-down, Mochiyama and Shizuru kick the office doors wide open, with Officer Rokuhara sprinting right behind the girls, desperately trying to... Trembling with rage, Mochiyama points a fierce finger right at the captain, screaming to Shizuru that this is the snake who framed Makoto. Ignoring the screeching teacher, Unaga narrows his eyes at Shizuru, silently calculating who this based on his intel, Makoto is practically a nobody, without any heavy hitters backing him up. Writing the kid off as absolute trash, he smirks and flat out refuses to let a so-called violent thief walk free. Kaya totally loses it, slamming the accusations and demanding proof of when this supposed crime even went down. Unaga smoothly dodges the question, waving it off as a highly classified operation that he cannot legally discuss. Mochiyama fires right back, screaming that caging Makoto while letting actual cartel thugs roam the streets is pure, unfiltered corruption. But the dirty cop does not even blink. He coldly orders the girls to get out immediately, or he will gladly slap them with obstruction of justice charge. Right as he reaches for his radio to call for backup, Shizuru gracefully takes a seat. Crossing her legs with absolute boss energy, she stares right into his soul and practically dares. Snapping, Unaga barks at his lackeys to drag the girls straight into a holding cell. He loudly declares them under arrest, slapping them with bogus conspiracy charges. Taking his power trip even further, he instantly suspends Kaya on the spot for protecting wanted felons. Kaya explodes into a furious rant, but Shizuru, she does not even break a sweat. When Shizuru calmly calls out his massive bluff, the corrupt chief just chuckles with pure arrogance and casually tacks on extra jail time for disrespecting a sworn officer. Leaning in, Shizuru coldly asks exactly whose payroll he is on to orchestrate this entire frame job against Makoto. Caught completely off guard, the chief starts stuttering desperately, trying to mask the sudden panic flashing across his face. Flipping the script, she casually asks if enough cash could magically make Makoto's little problem disappear. Regaining his twisted swagger, Unaga leans back and sneers that the kid crossed the absolute wrong VIPs. And with a wicked grin, he promises that the two girls are about to share his miserable fate. The dirty cop then shamelessly spins a horrifyingly perfect cover story right to their faces. He brutally details how easy he brags about framing the girls for murdering the rookie cop, framing their own deaths as a heroic police shootout, painting them as violent fugitives who tragically gunned down an officer in cold blood. Listening to this utterly psychotic master plan, Kaya and Mochiyama freeze up, visibly trembling at the very real danger. Yet Shizuru, she does not flinch. Instead, she drops, pulling out her phone, which had been on an active call the entire time. She casually asks, "Director Ogi, did you catch every word that corrupt chief just spewed?" A stern voice instantly confirms he heard it all, draining every ounce of color from Unaga's terrified face. She playfully asks if he still needs a formal introduction. Through the speaker, Director Ogi relentlessly lists off Unaga's criminal charges, specifically highlighting his massive screw-up of threatening a high-ranking council member's family. Stripped of his badge in a matter of seconds, Unaga is suspended effective immediately and slated for a brutal... The director then announces he is personally heading down to the station right this minute to clean up the mess. The harsh reality finally hits. Shaking like a leaf, desperately racking his brain to figure out exactly which political titan he just crossed. Putting him out of his misery, Shizuru flashes a cold smile and reveals her true identity. The heir to the legendary Suga family of Neihai. Right then and there, the disgraced chief realizes he did not just step on a landmine, he jumped on it. Cutting over to the damp holding cells, Makoto is still totally mesmerized by the mysterious parting gift Funaki slipped him. Checking the incredibly low volume of spirit liquid swirling inside, he figures this is strictly a one-shot power-up. Suddenly footsteps echo down the hall. His instincts flare up, but as he snaps his head around, his jaw drops, seeing Shizuru and Mochiyama casually standing outside his bars. Across town, word finally reaches Hashimoto that his flawless master plan has completely gone up in flames. Losing his absolute mind, he violently trashes his own living room, screaming over the fact that one of his top thugs is bleeding out, while the other is rotting behind bars. Shattering a handful of priceless vases across the room, he furiously plots his next move. He knows blowing the Ima family mission puts his own neck on the chopping block. Refusing to wave the white flag, he deploys his personal muscle, the absolute deadliest guy on his payroll. He barks strict orders to drag Makoto back breathing, swearing to butcher the trash with his own two hands. Meanwhile, Makoto strolls back into his apartment, his wallet completely drained, after stocking up on rare alchemy ingredients. Wasting zero time, he throws the concoction together and tosses the finished pill straight down the hatch. Instantly, a rush of pure power surges through his veins. A brilliant golden aura swallows him whole as his body actually levitates off the floor. Sure, the elixir is a bit muddy by his standards, but Makoto flashes, pulling this off in a wasteland utterly starved of spiritual energy. That is nothing short of a miracle. At long last, he shatters his bottleneck, successfully rocketing into stage 2 of chi refining. Eager to test his fresh upgrades, he triggers the Cloud Shadow step. He zips across the room in a total blur, leaving even his pet dog. Grinning at the results, Makoto confidently declares that not even a speeding bullet could catch him now. But the celebration ends fast. He needs to figure out how to score his next batch of spirit liquid, having already drained Funaki's gift. He weighs the idea of hitting up Ryuta, but taking the standard route there is essentially a death wish. Instead, he pivots to a shady local contact Funaki hooked him up with. The only catch, he needs serious cash. Just getting his foot in the door is going to run him roughly 2 million yen. Right on cue, a flashy television commercial pushing a miracle beauty cream catches his eye. In a society totally obsessed with chasing eternal youth, Makoto spots the ultimate goldmine. Snatching a sleek package off his table, he gears up to debut his secret weapon at an exclusive gala. Flashback to just 5 hours ago. Fresh out of a prison cell, he sat down for a quiet lunch with Shizuru. Staring across the table, he could barely wrap his head around the fact that this humble girl was actually a powerful councilman's daughter. Breaking the silence, she pulled a favor, begging him to be her +1 at a high society bash at the Shigao building to celebrate her mother bouncing back from illness. That exact skyscraper happens to be the crown jewel of the city's cosmetic empire, and Shizuru holds the keys to the entire place. This upscale event is exactly where Makoto plans to make his grand play. Fast forward to the next evening. Makoto steps out of the elevator into a glamorous, top-floor penthouse, tightly gripping his mysterious box. Tucked safely inside is the Ju Yan pill. Sure, crafting god-tier spirit pills is out of his current league, but whipping up a beauty potion like this, that is absolute child's play. Back on the Luye continent, this pill was the ultimate budget-friendly cheat code for female cultivators wanting flawless skin. Now Makoto plans to flip a few to wealthy socialites at the party, hoping to easily rake in that 2 million yen. Sweeping his gaze across the ballroom, he locks eyes with Shizuru's family, immediately strategizing how to reel in his elite targets. Meanwhile, Shizuru is stuck in absolute hell. Her Aunt Ino and Uncle Shiro are cornering her, ruthlessly pressuring her to tie the knot. Even though she is barely in her 30s, these toxic relatives are already branding her a dusty old maid, threatening that she will rot away, just like their elderly spinster aunt Masami. Shiro twists the knife even deeper, brutally insulting Masami to her face, and calling her a complete waste. The poor woman stammers desperately, trying to defend her life choices, but her fumbling words only throw gasoline on Shiro's raging ego trip. Yoko finally snaps, ordering Shiro to shut his mouth, while Shizuru furiously reminds him that Masami was the one who raised his ungrateful butt, along with half the family right after their grandmother passed away. Completely unfazed, Shiro turns his venom on Yoko, demanding she force Shizuru to settle down immediately. Still fragile from her lengthy coma, Yoko erupts into a violent cough. Shizuru panics, rushing to hold her ailing mother. Yet even with the room holding its breath, Shiro refuses to back off. He arrogantly tosses out the name of a wealthy family, demanding Shizuru marry into their ranks like a help. He aggressively barks that if she doesn't get a ring on her finger right now, society will toss her out like damaged goods. Masami tries to squeak out a defense, but Shiro viciously cuts her down, snarling that no amount of expensive makeup will ever bring back her withered youth. Right on cue, Makoto steps out of the shadows, ready to steal the spotlight. He loudly calls out Shiro's garbage attitude, mocking him for disrespecting Shizuru, an absolute queen in the cosmetics industry. Boiling with rage, Shiro screams for the bouncers to drag this arrogant punk out of the building. But Shizuru drops a massive bombshell on the room, revealing that this guy is the one who actually pulled Yoko back from the brink. Grasping Makoto's hands warmly, Yoko pours out her deep gratitude for selling that life-saving talisman. Shiro practically gags at the sight of him violently pointing fingers and branding Makoto a filthy con artist. He aggressively barks that Yoko's snapping out of her coma was nothing but modern medical science at work. Completely brushing off the toxic insults, Makoto smoothly introduces himself not just as a researcher, but as Shizuru. That bold title even catches Shizuru off guard, making her eyes widen in pure shock. The snooty onlookers absolutely erupt, sneering and ordering him to keep his mouth shut, since he has no place in their high-class pivoting the conversation to the ultimate fantasy of reversing the aging process. He casually slides the container over to Masami, daring her to pop the legendary Yu-Yuan pill. Shiro instantly flips out, aggressively warning everyone that the sketchy capsule is probably laced with lethal poison. Masami just stares dead at the tiny object, completely paralyzed, silent. Stepping up, Shizuru warmly assures her that Makoto is the real deal, while Yoko jumps in to confidently back him. The entire room instantly breaks into a frantic buzz, violently scoffing at the sheer absurdity of a magical anti-aging. Needing to tip the scales, Makoto leans in close. He whispers directly into Masami's ear, hitting a raw nerve. A dark shadow crosses her face as she remembers every single ungrateful parasite who sucked her dry and then spent years relentlessly mocking her aging looks. With absolutely nothing left to lose, Masami decides to roll the dice. Jaws physically drop across the room as she boldly snatches the pill and tosses it straight down her throat. The room goes dead silent. Every single pair of eyes locks on to her. Tick-tock. A few agonizingly heavy seconds tick by. Shiro completely loses his mind. Bursting He absolutely roasts Makoto, brutally calling out his... But out of absolutely nowhere, the medicine aggressively kicks into high gear. The crowd violently gasps as Masami physically rewinds time right before their eyes, her wrinkles melting away to reveal... A frantic bystander violently shoves a hand mirror straight into her face, so Masami's breath physically hitches. She is absolutely mesmerized by her own In the blink of an eye, Makoto's stash turns into absolute gold. A frantic mob of wealthy older women violently swarms him, desperately begging for a taste. Playing it brutally cool, he slaps a massive 400,000 yen price tag on each dose, casually dropping the bomb that he only brought exactly 10 of them. Pure unadulterated chaos erupts. An impromptu cutthroat auction kicks off on the spot, with socialites aggressively screaming over each other. Hypnotized by the sheer profit potential, even the skeptical Shiro violently changes his tune, scrambling to throw... His greedy little mind is racing. He fully intends to lock down an ironclad monopoly on these pills, even if it completely drains. Ino frantically grabs his arm to talk some sense into him, but Shiro violently snaps back, vicious. His twisted master plan: brainwash and stall Makoto just long enough to forcefully arrange Shizuru's marriage into the incredibly wealthy... Yeah, you heard that right. This utter scum is literally plotting to auction off his own family member under a fake wedding veil just to pocket a gargantuan cash payout. Right as the tension peaks, a massive, sweaty executive from the notorious Kusan Group aggressively pushes his way toward Makoto. He aggressively slams a 4 million yen offer on the table, demanding total exclusive... Boom! A rival corporate suit instantly counters, screaming out a massive 20 million. Smelling blood in the water, a dangerously cocky Shiro steps right into the crossfire, boldly telling the heavyweights to... Pulling a total power move, he corners Makoto for a private huddle and smoothly drops a massive 30 million yen offer right on his lap. But wait, the sheer greed doesn't stop there. The absolute audacity is insane. Shiro demands a massive 70% cut, leaving Makoto with exactly 30. His pathetic excuse for... He claims it is a steal since they would be riding... Overhearing this absolute delusion, Shizuru steps up and completely roasts him. She brutally labels his entire family a useless trash can, with absolutely zero real world... That brutal verbal slap to the face makes Shiro... Spitting mad, he furiously reminds her that she shares their maternal bloodline. But Shizuru does not flinch, instantly biting back that he permanently forfeited any right to... She violently drops the ultimate truth bomb. This pathetic failure blew over 100 million yen, recklessly gambling away the very... Sweating bullets, Shiro frantically tries to lie his way out. But Shizuru is lethal. She casually whips out hard... Standing completely frozen, Masami and Yoko are absolutely floored. Having been kept entirely in the dark, they are entirely horrified to finally discover that this parasite... Shiro, absolutely sweating bullets, stammers out a... Shizuru doesn't stop there. She drops another bombshell. Shiro crashed. He wanted to extort Yoko for cash, exactly like how he leached her grandmother completely dry. Reading him like an open book, she cuts him off instantly, vowing he won't get a single dime. On top of that, she exposes his grift to scam Makoto, knowing full well the scumbag is dead broke and doesn't even have the 30 million yen. Completely crushed, Shiro drops to his knees, desperately groveling for her mercy. With zero pride left, he turns to Yoko, pleading for her to tag team and beg... But Yoko immediately shoots him down, her eyes filled with nothing but for tearing their mother's legacy to shreds. Acting like a pathetic man-child, he actually grabs onto Masami's dress, whining for her to jump in and save him, claiming he is the last remaining male heir, holding the family together. Absolutely sick to her stomach over this ungrateful parasite, Masami harshly shoves him away, leaving him to rot. Now Shiro finds himself cornered by the exact same women he always treated like dirt. Shizuru stares him down with a brutal ultimatum. He can either rot behind bars or sign over his entire company to her for a single pathetic yen. The crushing reality hits, leaving him a totally... The crowd whispers and laughs in his face, agreeing he absolutely had this coming. Pivoting back to Makoto, Shizuru offers to hook him up with a heavy-hitting business pro. She breaks it down, explaining that 40 million is a solid baseline to settle for, and he needs to lock down 80% of the profits. She warns him to keep his guard up, since the corporate sharks in this room would gladly eat him alive. But catching her totally off guard, Makoto simply puts the reins entirely in her hands. Later that night, she drops him off at his place, tossing a sweet compliment about the building. Makoto humbly shrugs it off, chuckling that it is just a rented spot. He shows his gratitude for the lift, and Shizuru gives him a warm smile, genuinely calling him her friend. The word catches him off guard, and he blinks in shock as she says it again, reaching out her hand to make their bond official. After shaking on it, he strolls inside his mind, racing as he processes the crazy night. Gazing up at the moon, he smiles, thinking this fresh start might actually be incredible. But the second he unlocks his front door, Makoto freezes in absolute horror. His poor dog is lying totally motionless in a massive pool of its own blood. A brutal dagger is still jammed firmly in place, as a sick, twisted warning. Staring at the carnage, Makoto's vision instantly goes red, with pure... Rewind just a few minutes. A sketchy thug had dialed Hashimoto, reporting that their target just pulled up with a girl. To plunge Hashimoto into absolute despair, the crew plotted to kidnap Shizuru right off the street. On the call, Hashimoto practically gloats about the bloody, messed-up message they left waiting in Makoto's living room. Snapping back to the present, Makoto sprints forward to check the pup. By some miracle, its chest is still rising. Praying his magic paper can work a miracle, he rips the blade out and slaps the glowing talisman directly onto the dog's wound. Up above, a masked assassin is clinging to the shadows, silently stalking him. Without warning, the killer dives from the ceiling, aiming a lethal strike right at Makoto's blind spot. But the thug's eyes go wide as Makoto grabs the dog and literally vanishes into thin air. Reappearing instantly behind his attacker, Makoto brutally stomps him into the floorboards with a single... Suddenly, a whole squad of goons floods the room, totally baffled by how their guy just got dropped. Makoto carefully slides his injured buddy to safety, stepping up to take on the mob single-handedly. He glares at them with pure, murderous intent, and the hitmen immediately rush forward to finish the job. One of the punks shouts a reminder the boss explicitly ordered them to take him alive. But the second they watch Makoto absolutely destroy their frontline fighter without breaking a sweat, the rest of the crew freezes dead in their tracks, completely paralyzed by the horrific display of power. Blind to the terrifying danger, one absolute idiot ignores, only to get his arm completely shredded like a piece of cheap meat. Locking him in a brutal death grip, Makoto twists his head, snapping his neck as easily as snapping a dry twig. Watching the bloodbath unfold, the surviving assassins realize they just messed with him. Desperate, the hitmen break out the heavy artillery, targeting his joints to cripple him on the spot. But what these clueless goons fail to realize is that Makoto already moves faster than a speeding bullet. Unfazed by the deafening gunfire, he blurs across the battlefield like a phantom, weaving through the lethal barrage with absolute ease. He swears to dismantle them piece by piece, forcing them to grovel for their lives and spit out their boss's name. Miles away, Shizuru wakes up as a prisoner to the unhinged Hashimoto, a total psychopath eager to subject her to his sick, sadistic games. Knowing full well she's the beloved daughter of the powerful councilman Kenji Shuga doesn't deter him. In fact, savoring his sick triumph, he double-checks her ID. But right as Shizuru thrashes against her restraints, a sudden ringtone shatters the tension. Annoyed, Hashimoto snaps his phone open, demanding a status report on the Makoto. Instead of his loyal grunts, Makoto's chilling voice greets him through the speaker, casually dropping the bomb that the entire hit squad has been wiped off the map. Never one to back down, the lunatic proudly brags about having Shizuru locked away in his clutches. Dumping a gallon of gasoline onto Makoto growls a lethal ultimatum. Let her go or suffer a brutal end. But the deranged villain just chuckles completely, brushing off the deadly threat. With a manic grin, Hashimoto puts Makoto on a 40-minute timer. If he doesn't show, the psycho promises to broadcast himself, taunting the furious hero to track them down. He violently cuts the connection dead. Blinded by pure, unadulterated rage, Makoto shatters the burner phone into plastic shrapnel. Back at the warehouse, Hashimoto resumes his nightmare-inducing torment, setting up his camera to film a gruesome little preview before the main massacre. He viciously rips the duct tape off her lips, ready to plunge into the horror, when heavy knocking abruptly echoes through the steel door. Ripping the door open, he's greeted by his panicked thugs, frantically reporting a blaring fire siren echoing across the facility. Cursing under his breath, Hashimoto barks at his men to kill the screeching system immediately before the cops show up and ruin his fun. Deciding to handle the headache personally, he orders his muscle to guard, but barely seconds after the psychotic boss stomps down the hallway, a massive fist obliterates one of the goons. The devastating strike launches the henchman backward, completely shattering the reinforced door off its hinges. Terrified but hopeful, Shizuru snaps her head up, desperately praying her knight in shining armor has finally... Flashback to exactly 1 hour earlier. Funaki pulled up to Makoto's place, carrying a crucial letter of introduction meant for Ryuta, but after calling his number repeatedly, he only got dead air. Frowning, he scrutinized the address, making absolutely certain he hadn't parked at the wrong damn house. Right then he caught snippets of a shady conversation, a scout whispering to Hashimoto that Makoto had just rolled up with his girl. Eavesdropping from the shadows, Funaki discovered a deadly trap. 6 cold-blooded killers were lurking inside, ready to butcher Makoto. Peeking closer, his blood ran cold. As he melting into the darkness, Funaki kept his eyes glued to the grim operation. The second the tires squealed against the pavement, he kicked his motorcycle into gear, tailing the kidnappers like a ghost to pin down their exact coordinates. After trailing them all the way to a heavily guarded, secluded estate, Funaki's frantic call finally connected with our hero. He rapidly spilled the devastating truth about Shizuru's abduction, feeding Makoto the precise GPS. Utterly blindsided, Makoto demanded to know how on earth his buddy had stumbled onto such top-secret intel. Right before the phone rang, Makoto had been busy brutally interrogating a surviving hitman, pummeling the absolute garbage out of him until he hovered over death's door, only to slap a magical healing tag on his bruised face, dragging him back from the afterlife for round 2. But with the clock ticking down, Makoto begged Funaki to step in and secure Shizuru. Handing over the rescue mission, the enraged powerhouse promised to personally drag Hashimoto down to the deepest pits of hell. Motivated by his friend's desperate plea, Funaki hacked the building's fire system. Lurking in the corridors, he bided his time until the coast was clear, stepping up to the oblivious grunts, who were busy whining about their unhinged. Channeling some serious Aquaman swagger, Funaki strolled right up to the goons, totally brushing off their confused shouts. Without uttering a single syllable, he unleashed a devastating, channeling incredible momentum to use a thug's flying body as a human battering ram. Dazed and disoriented from the horrific ordeal, Shizuru weakly sobbed Makoto's name, completely convinced her boyfriend was standing in the doorway. But as the smoke cleared, it was just Funaki valiantly honoring his friend's desperate plea for help. Wasting absolutely zero time, Funaki scoops her trembling body over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, sprinting away from the hellhole before the psycho boss, crashing through the exit into the dark, overgrown back garden. He zeroes in on the getaway vehicle, praying they can vanish into the night before the entire cartel swarms them. His fingers barely graze the doorknob before a gunshot echoes and searing hot lead rips straight. The sheer force sweeps his legs out from under him, sending him slamming hard against the floor while desperately clutching Shizuru close to his chest, gritting his teeth against the agonizing burn. Seconds later, Hashimoto struts into the room with a sickening smirk, loudly boasting about his picture-perfect aim. His lackeys eagerly nod along, applauding right on cue like a bunch of brainless lapdogs. Funaki's pulse hammers in his ears, as a single terrifying thought crosses his mind. Choking down his rising dread, he flashes a strained grin and greets the psychotic mobster like they were just catching up. But Hashimoto is absolutely eating up the power trip. He throws his head back and barks out a cruel laugh, practically drooling at the thought of torturing the traitor. Refusing to just roll over and die, Funaki forces himself upright, planting his feet firmly as he dares the villain to make a move. Meanwhile, just outside the lavish estate, Makoto pulls up, ready to deliver some much-needed karma to the resident lunatic. The security detail scrambles toward the front gate, completely baffled that someone actually has the guts to storm their turf in broad daylight. Boiling with pure, unadulterated rage, Makoto doesn't even spare them a second glance. He casually shatters the entrance with a single devastating strike, looking like a literal one-punch man, leaving the armed thugs completely paralyzed with shock. Snapping out of it, the goons swarm him from all sides, foolishly banking on the idea that sheer numbers will save their skins. Too bad for them, Makoto shreds through their ranks without breaking a sweat, tossing grown men around like crumpled-up paper bags. In less than 10 seconds, the once chaotic courtyard goes dead quiet. Standing tall in a sea of groaning bodies, Makoto proudly declares his arrival, fully leaning into his badass, overpowered protagonist energy. Back inside the manor, Funaki is struggling just to stay alive. Even though he managed to drop a handful of thugs, his battered body is completely running on fumes. He internally curses himself, deeply regretting ever. Hashimoto, meanwhile, is practically floating on a massive ego trip. He arrogantly sneers, promising to chop Funaki into tiny pieces and mail him back to his boss in a takeout box. But his dramatic monologue is rudely interrupted when the massive oak doors literally explode inward. Makoto steps through the dust like the literal Grim Reaper, coldly announcing that he's here to drag Hashimoto straight to hell. Funaki nearly cries tears of joy, seeing his overpowered backup finally arrive. Without missing a beat, Makoto tosses him a glowing healing talisman, instantly restoring his depleted stamina. Panicking Hashimoto screams at his while Makoto casually steps up to hold the line. Funaki scoops Chizuru into his arms and sprints toward the exit to finish the job. Activating his cloud shadow technique, Makoto becomes an absolute blur, weaving through a hail of bullets and dropping the gangsters one by one with lethal precision. Hashimoto stares in sheer horror, his jaw practically hitting the floor as he watches this guy move like a superhero on steroids. Realizing he just messed with the wrong guy, he quietly starts backing away toward completely abandoning his arrogant tough guy act. Hashimoto turns tail and scurries down the corridor like a terrified little rat. He desperately questions his own intel, wondering why the underworld labeled a literal monster like Makoto as a total pushover, when the guy is obviously an absolute apex. He quickly reaches a secure bunker and frantically starts punching in the passcode, but his trembling fingers betray him. And before he can escape the limp bodies of his last few guards, smash through the doorway, confirming his worst nightmare. All of his twisted arrogance evaporates instantly. His face goes completely pale as he stutters out a pathetic plea for mercy. Desperate, he tries, dropping the name of his powerful sponsor. But Makoto just glares at him completely unbothered. Unlike his fiercely loyal subordinates, Hashimoto is nothing more than a spineless coward when cornered. One step closer, for Makoto's terrifying aura, is all it takes for him to crack Having absolutely no clue who this Lord Ima is, Makoto flashes him a deadly piercing glare, silently demanding the full story. Trembling like a leaf, Hashimoto blurts out that Lord Ima is the untouchable heir to the massive Ima syndicate. He confesses that this powerful VIP sent the hit squad after Makoto entirely because of a stupid, base. He spills the dirty secret Makoto supposedly did the deed with Setsu. He drops another massive bombshell. Lord Ama is secretly pulling strings to force a political marriage with the wealthy heiress of the Amatani bloodline. Because of this massive power play, they need Makoto permanently wiped off the map to dodge any future roadblocks. Makoto swiftly sifts through the original body's memories, but comes up totally empty. The previous owner never once shared a private moment with this supposed fiancé. It clicks instantly, someone is deliberately framing him for this mess. After spilling his guts, Hashimoto snarls, demanding Makoto to back off and let him walk. He desperately threatens that Makoto will face the absolute wrath of crossing a heavyweight powerhouse like Lord Aima. Hearing that specific name drop, Makoto instantly pieces the puzzle together. This mysterious Lord Aima. Meanwhile, Hashimoto keeps babbling like a broken record, desperately swearing to help Makoto out if he just spares his miserable life. Too bad Makoto never plays those games. He ruthlessly clocks the loser right in the jaw, launching him backward with such insane force that stepping into the hidden room, a horrifying sight greets him. Several young women are heavily chained up. Without missing a beat, Makoto shatters their heavy iron restraints and calmly drops his own hunting blade onto the cold. Before turning his back to leave, he gives the victims one simple, chilling instruction. They can do absolutely whatever they desire to the trash bleeding on the floor. As the traumatized women slowly encircle him, a terrified Hashimoto pathetically begs, offering them mountains of cash for his freedom. But these, thanks to his twisted, sick games, they have already survived the darkest depths of hell. With agonizing tears streaming down their faces, they gleefully prepare. While violent justice is being served, Makoto steps out into the night to meet back up with Funaki. He swiftly slaps a glowing healing talisman onto Shizuru's brutal injuries, then orders Funaki to scramble before the cops swarm the area. Turns out he had anonymously dialed 911 right before raiding the compound. His goal now is straightforward: securely pass Shizuru over to the flashing siren. When Funaki questions his next move, Makoto darkly declares that he is going to hunt down Aima and every single rat gunning for his head. But he pauses mid-sentence. A grim realization hits him. If he digs any deeper into this massive underground conspiracy, he is going to be severely outnumbered. Yet following that explosive, blood-soaked drama, with Hashimoto, Makoto surprisingly slips right back into his boring, everyday routine. Still, the shadow of the true mastermind relentlessly gnaws at his mind. Pumping out a rapid-fire set of push-ups, he swears. A sudden rap on the door shatters his focus, and Makoto pulls it open to find a courier sent straight from Shizuru. The guy shoves a premium envelope into Makoto's hands. Her instructions are crystal clear. She is hitting the road the exact second he gives the green light. Makoto glares at the elegant card, flipping it over, as he tries to decode what she is actually plotting. Once the messenger vanishes, he dials Shizuru, demanding to know why a tailored suit came with the paper. She casually drops the bomb that the invite is from the elite Hoshisu bloodline. Makoto frowns, completely baffled. Why on earth would he waste his time rubbing elbows at their gala? Shizuru quickly schools him, explaining that the Hoshisu Empire holds a total monopoly over the city's pharmaceutical industry. Translation: if they want their miracle beauty pills to explode onto the market, they desperately need to code. Then she drops the ultimate kicker. His estranged ex-fiancée, Setsu, is on the guest list. That single name instantly hooks him. Suddenly, this boring gala sounds like a golden opportunity. Fast forward to the main event, and Makoto steps out of his ride, looking absolutely razor-sharp. Gliding through the massive ballroom, Shizuru discreetly nods toward Pierce, the top dog of the Ace Group, and Taro, the heavyweight chairman commanding the Kengo Group. These guys are absolute titans, ruling the local corporate underworld. Knowing absolutely nothing about corporate politics, Makoto genuinely wonders if these billionaires are also here to kiss up to the Hoshisu clan. Shizuru chuckles, finding his naive take absolutely hilarious. Honestly, she cannot fathom how a guy boasting such a supreme pedigree is totally blind to the city's apex predators. She leans in, whispering that every suit in this room would kill just to shake hands with the distant cousin of the Amatani family. Right now, the entire crowd is holding their breath, practically salivating for the Amatani heiress to make her grand entrance. Right on cue, the Hoshisu matriarch Nana sweeps into the hall, and strutting right beside her is the highly anticipated Setsu. Makoto narrows his eyes, instantly detecting a dense, undeniable aura of spiritual energy pulsing off his infamous ex. His piercing gaze locks on to her. Silent, he narrows his eyes, questioning if she might actually be. A storm of theories races through his brain, sparking the question of whether this world hides some secret cultivation system. He hasn't cracked the code yet. She isn't even bothering to mask it. Figuring she might have ties to the Ima clan, he bookmarks the thought to interrogate her later. Playing it cool, he silently posts up right next to Shizuru. As she flashes a warm smile and greets Nana, the powerful matriarch leading the Hoshisu bloodline, Nana warmly checks in on her mother's current condition, showing genuine relief that Yoko recently bounced back from the brink of death. Shizuru beams with gratitude, revealing that her mom is slowly reclaiming her former vitality. She then slides an ornate box toward Nana, offering a rare Juyan pill as a personal gift from Yo. Shizuru smoothly pitches the item, calling it their corporation's cutting-edge anti-aging miracle. Nana's eyes widen. Already familiar with the hyped-up wonder drug, the surrounding crowd instantly erupts into a frenzy of hushed gossip, absolutely losing their minds over the astronomical price tag. Setsu's gaze sharply snaps to the tiny package, her curiosity instantly piqued. Nana inspects the treasure closely, completely mesmerized by the sheer quality of this top-tier spiritual elixir. She showers the unknown alchemist with massive respect for their flawless. Scanning it closer, she spots 0 official seals. Baffled, she presses Shizuru to drop the name of the mastermind behind it. Shizuru doesn't miss a beat. She gestures to Makoto, proudly unveiling him as the genius alchemist and her core business partner. Nana and Setsu are left completely stunned when the unassuming Makoto steps up to formally introduce himself. Nana lights up laughing as she remembers bouncing him on her knee when he was just an infant, heavily applauding his insane new talents. She then trashes the Amori clan, calling them absolute idiots for tossing out such a prodigy. Setsu frantically cuts her aunt off, trying to shut her up. Setsu coldly snaps that brewing pills is a completely worthless parlor trick to high society elites. She doubles down, claiming that raw cultivation power is the absolute only currency that matters. Twisting the knife. Setsu claims that if Makoto actually possessed any real strength, the Amatani family would have rolled out the red carpet for him. Listening to this snobby rant, a light bulb goes off for Makoto. The aristocratic elites of this realm have clearly already tapped into the path of cultivation. Even so, it's absolute garbage compared to the god-tier techniques he mastered back on the Luya continent. Once Setsu wraps up her arrogant speech, she tosses one last cheap shot at Makoto's supposed uselessness. Nana just shakes her head, completely shutting down her niece's cynical logic. She stands firm, insisting that forging the Juyan pills is an incredibly monumental achievement. Intrigued, she leans in and asks him to name the legendary mentor who passed down these alchemy skills. Makoto pauses. For a split second, a bittersweet memory flashes across his mind, drifting back to a mentor from his past life. Deciding to play it safe, he smoothly answers, telling her he doesn't have a master. He casually shrugs it off, claiming he only dabbled in alchemy as a fun little side hobby. Just as he opens his mouth to ask a crucial question, an obnoxiously loud guy crashes the party. He dramatically shouts his birthday wishes across the room to... The entire room halts. Whispers erupt as the guests stare, trying to figure out who... A bystander gasps, dropping the bomb that this loudmouth is actually Joe Ima, the ultra-rich heir of the notorious Ima. Makoto's blood instantly runs cold. He's suddenly locking eyes with the exact same ruthless bastard who's been hunting him down. Dripping with fake aristocratic charm, Lord Ima kisses up to Nana with hollow greetings. But like a textbook creep, his predator gaze immediately locks onto Shizuru. Oblivious Nana politely introduces the two. Standing right there, Makoto glares out the corner of his eye, catching the guy is practically undressing Shizuru with his eye. Ima lays on the fake charm, introducing himself to Shizuru. Playing the perfect gentleman, he extends a hand to grab hers. Absolutely done with this disgusting charade, Makoto strikes like lightning, intercepting the handshake and tightly gripping Ima's hand instead. With a razor-sharp smirk, he coldly states, feigning complete ignorance. Lord Ima looks Makoto dead in the eye, and caught off guard by this blatant act, Makoto smirks inwardly, wondering exactly how long this guy can keep up the deceptive charade. His intel strongly points to Ima being a hidden cultivator, and Makoto is practically itching to put that theory to the ultimate test. He discreetly pulses his own spiritual energy forward, probing the older man for any hidden traces of a martial aura. Now, experts usually mask their power to fly under the radar. The only time they give off absolutely zero energy is if their core is completely shattered and utterly useless. By shooting a concentrated thread of aura straight into Ima's meridians, Makoto intends to forcefully expose his true colors. But as the seconds agonizingly tick by, the intense scan turns up absolutely nothing. The guy's meridians are completely bone dry, devoid of even a single drop of spiritual power. This shocking revelation throws Makoto for a massive loop. Could his trusted intel really be completely garbage? Lost deep in thought, he accidentally crushes Amai's handshake, forcing the older man to violently snatch his aching hand back with a grimace. Flustered, Ima mumbles a hasty greeting, then drops Makoto like a bad habit to shower Setsu with his undivided attention. Makoto simply stands there totally baffled. How the hell could this guy not have a single ounce of energy radiating from his body? There wasn't even the faintest whisper of bloodlust or killing intent during their little stare-down. Moving past the awkward tension, the high society guests finally take their plush seats to Right as the plates are cleared, a butler steps up loudly, directing the elite crowd to the grand hall for the evening ballroom dance. The elegant music swells, and couples gracefully take the floor. Yet Makoto's racing mind is completely somewhere else. He keeps obsessing over Hashimoto. Did that sneaky informant feed him a massive lie about Aima's hidden strength? Across the glittering room, Shizuru gracefully shoots down one dance offer after another, her eyes desperately scanning the massive crowd for Makoto. Watching her latest brutal rejection, a bystander leans in to whisper snarkily to the defeated suitor. He scoffs harshly, pointing out that the dazzling air. He firmly adds that she is entirely out of their league, noting that even top-tier billionaires break a serious sweat trying to impress her. But right in the middle of his bitter, rambling rant, his buddy wildly gestures toward the crowded dance floor. That same untouchable ice queen is practically throwing herself at Makoto. The jaw-dropping sight of the proud beauty humbly asking Makoto for a dance leaves the entire ballroom completely paralyzed, even throwing Setsu totally off guard. Meanwhile, deep in the shadowy parking lot, Ima marches toward his luxury sedan, barking strict orders for the security detail to stay the hell away. The moment the heavy doors click shut, muffled, unsettling thuds violently echo from inside the dark tent. The stationed guards immediately start gossiping, totally creeped out by their boss's weird habit of locking himself away with just a single guard. One guard chimes in, visibly shivering, as he mentions how every single hand-picked bodyguard eventually completely loses their mind. They become so incredibly hollow and broken that they cannot even recognize their own flesh. Their hushed, terrified whispers drop an insane rumor. Lord Ima supposedly swaps out his physical vessels, as casually as tossing away used napkins. Whenever a guard gets discarded, they return acting like a completely shattered stranger. Hell, rumor has it, one poor guy simply vanished off the face of the earth. Cut to the back seat. The supposed bodyguard he fiercely spits venom at him, absolutely enraged that the old man dared to reach for another woman's hand while Setsu was watching. The once arrogant lord now cowers in absolute terror, hyperventilating and begging for forgiveness over his incredible. Suddenly, a blinding wave of pure spiritual energy violently explodes from a heavy ring on the bodyguard's hand. Flesh and bone twist sickeningly as the bodyguard's face physically morphs, revealing the sinister, chilling smirk of the true Lord Ima. Staring down at his trembling decoy, the real Ima sneers coldly, admitting, gripping the imposter by the throat, he ruthlessly promises a gruesome death if the idiot ever screws up like that again. Minutes later, the car door swings smoothly open. The true mastermind steps out flawlessly casually, ordering 2 fresh guards to escort him back. One of the security guys shoots a terrified glare at the blacked-out windows, his mind racing to figure out what horrific fate met the guy left inside. A cold sweat drips down his neck as he realizes the dark rumors are entirely true. Another bodyguard trapped in the suffocating darkness of the back seat. The terrified imposter lies brutally hog-tied and tightly gagged. He thrashes around like a trapped wild animal, desperately fighting the heavy restraints. But the thick knots refuse. Reality violently crashes down on him. Hot tears stream down the fake lord's bruised face as he completely surrenders to. Meanwhile, bathed in crystal chandelier light, the real Ima glides smoothly back into the ballroom, flashing a charming smile, as if he didn't just pull off some straight-up alien body-snatching madness in the parking lot. Ima flashes a cheerful smile, warmly calling out Setsu's name, but she does not even flinch. Her gaze is deadlocked, burning with raw, bitter jealousy, as she watches her ex glide across the floor with his new lover. Honestly, the whole venue is practically holding its breath, with every single pair of eyes glued straight to Makoto and Shizuru, confused by her icy silence. Aima traces her venomous stare to see exactly what has her so paralyzed. Hushed murmurs ripple through the elegant crowd like wildfire, as everyone desperately tries to figure out who this mysterious... The guests are completely baffled, wondering how in the world this stranger managed to melt the heart of Shizuru, the legendary... Utterly oblivious to the buzzing gossip, Shizuru and Makoto drift beautifully into their own little universe. As the soaring music hits a spectacular climax, the sweeping melody sends the dazzling duo straight to Cloud 9. Totally hypnotized by the intoxicating romance of the moment, leaving him completely speechless, she keeps showering him with compliments. Amazed at how perfectly he matches, leaning in close, Shizuru whispers that putting on this spectacular show is the absolute only way to bait the elusive Hoshisu family. It is a crucial, calculated move for their Grandmaster plan to... Flashing a confident smirk, Makoto is more than happy to steal the spotlight with his flawless rhythm. After all, the original owner of this body, blending those ingrained instincts with his superhuman balance from cultivation, Makoto is an absolute beast on the floor. Absolute fire on the dance floor. Blown away by the spectacle she just witnessed, Nana turns to Setsu, dying to know if she had any idea Makoto could move like that. Never one to admit defeat, Setsu just scoffs, tearing him down as nothing more than a worthless commoner who just happens to have rhythm. Nana playfully calls her bluff, pointing out how her eyes were practically glued to him the entire time he was performing. Ima strolls into the mix, giving Nana the perfect opening to grill him on whether he seriously has no clue who Makoto is. Ima plays it cool, swearing up and down that today is the very first time they have ever crossed paths. But Nana is not buying it for a split second. It just does not add up. How could the golden boy of a top-tier family be completely in the dark about a rumor spreading like wildfire? Scrambling to cover his tracks, Ima spins up a weak alibi, but Nana brushes it right off. Instead, she shifts gears, openly marveling at Makoto's insane knack for crafting pills. Reading between the lines, Ima realizes she is plotting to elevate Makoto's status, and that thought sends a massive wave of insecurity crashing over him. A dark, venomous look flashes across his face, as the only reason he tolerates her attitude is because of Setsu. Pivoting his deadly glare toward Makoto, he silently damns him too. Meanwhile, those two chatty guys from earlier have finally pieced together exactly who Makoto is. Completely oblivious to the fact that Setsu is standing right in earshot, they start loudly dissecting the messy love triangle between her Ima and Makoto. The silver-haired guy openly ridicules Makoto, laughing at how he fumbled the ultimate shortcut to climbing the ranks. His blonde buddy jumps in, declaring that the only way that Yamori garbage can ever bounce back is to grovel at Setsu's feet. They eagerly guess that crashing this party was just Makoto's desperate scheme to crawl back into her orbit. Hitting her absolute boiling point with the toxic gossip, Setsu abruptly stands up to ditch the table. Nana begs her to hang out a little longer, but Setsu coldly brushes her off, claiming she is exhausted. But rather than making a clean exit, she abruptly minding his own damn business. Makoto just stares back. She completely snaps, barking orders at him like a furious Karen on a rampage, demanding he drop whatever twisted fantasies he has about using her clout to drag the Amori family out of the gutter. Baffled beyond belief, Makoto looks at her like she just escaped from an asylum. Spinning around to storm off, she snaps at him to take his pill-making cash and get a real life rather than clinging to a woman's coattails to climb the social ladder. Unfazed, Makoto softly counters, asking her to take a good hard look at who actually needs a reality check. Setsu freezes in shock, as he casually points out how wildly chaotic her spiritual energy is right now. He had already spotted the erratic aura bleeding out of her from a mile away. Makoto breaks it down without missing a beat, accurately diagnosing that she has been recklessly gored. He coldly lays out the facts. Taking dangerous shortcuts like that is a guaranteed way to permanently shatter her. Locking eyes with her, he drops a brutal truth bomb. Her physical vessel is already pushed to the absolute breaking point. Still rocking that superiority complex, Setsu is utterly baffled as to how a total nobody could read her condition like an open book. Throwing a curveball, Makoto offers a way to fix her shattered core, but Setsu stubbornly refuses to buy into his claims. He simply shrugs it off. After all, if she wants to play the skeptic, it is her funeral. A genuine flash of terror grips Setsu as he softly warns her that the clock is ticking down to zero. Stepping right into her personal space, he pitches a high-stakes trade. He will cure her, but only if she acts as a delivery girl to drop something off for Ima. All the while, Ima is watching this close encounter from across the room, absolutely boiling. Once the bash wraps up, Shizuru and Makoto bump into Nana, whose eyes light up at the mention of the legendary Juyan pill, prompting her to pull them aside for a highly confidential chat. Strolling through the moonlit gardens, Makoto cuts through the pleasantries and demands to know what she is actually after. Nana just laughs off the tension playfully, telling him to loosen up and just call her. Makoto firmly rejects the title, reminding her that his ties to the Yamori clan are completely severed. At that, a knowing smile crosses her face as she points out how he and Setsu are. Nana dives into the tragic backstory, revealing that Setsu is an orphan who got twisted into a lifeless marionette for the Amatani Syndicate. The man pulling her strings from the shadows is none other than her own, a ruthless tyrant who micromanages every breath she. Fortunately, a high-ranking martial arts dynasty spotted her hidden talent. Backed by their immense power, Setsu scored a golden ticket to ascend into a legendary cultivator. Nana drops a harsh truth: unless Setsu shatters the limits of a mere mortal, she is doomed to be nothing but a puppet on her family's strings. All this mystical cultivator jargon just leaves Shizuru scratching her head in pure confusion. Makoto, however, totally gets it. He knows that breaking past mortal boundaries requires cracking the mysterious third stage of cultivation. Out in the cultivation world, the power gap between the second and third stages is an absolute canyon. Crossing that threshold is a near impossible nightmare. It suddenly clicks for Makoto. This brutal reality is exactly why Setsu resorted to such reckless extremes, just to force a breakthrough. But what puzzles him is, why exactly is Nana dumping all this heavy lore onto his lap? With a heavy sigh, Nana confesses that she has poured everything into curing Setsu's affliction. Yet every single remedy has fallen flat. Her despair only shifted into blinding hope the moment she stumbled upon Makoto's Juyan pills. Shizuru's jaw practically hits the floor. How could the president of the Traditional Medicine Association place more faith in Makoto than in certified professionals? Makoto silently chews on Nana's words, processing all the wild rumors surrounding this legendary cultivation. He realizes that compared to the mighty Luye continent, the martial techniques in this realm are honestly a bit primitive. Snapping him right out of his thoughts, Nana boldly declares she wants a massive slice of the Juyan pill distribution. Shizuru is absolutely buzzing. With the Hoshisu family throwing their weight behind them, their profits are destined to shoot straight to the moon. Nana teases the girl for being a total money lover. But the laughter quickly fades as she desperately begs them to save Setsu. She drops a bombshell right after the engagement was shattered. Setsu staged a full-blown rebellion. Makoto freezes completely blindsided by this revelation. Right on cue, Ima struts over to pay his respects to Nana. Turning to leave, he extends a hand out toward Makoto, flashing a fake smile as he hopes they cross paths again. Bam! A violent surge of spiritual energy pulses straight through Ima. The split second their skin connects. Makoto's eyes narrow in deep suspicion. He hadn't sensed even a drop of this aura during their first clash. Brushing it off, Ima swaggers over to his ride, where a lackey mentions that Setsu left a mysterious gift for him. Thrilled, Ima hastily tears into the box, only to stare blankly at a simple origami butterfly resting inside. Utterly baffled by the bizarre gesture, he carelessly chucks, barking a strict order to keep his grubby hands off it without permission. Looking back at his little stare-down with Makoto, Ima scoffs, still writing the guy off as nothing but pathetic garbage. With a sinister smirk, he twists his spirit liquid ring, silently declaring an all-out war against both Nana and Makoto. A blinding aura erupts from the jewelry, morphing his features, until he becomes a flawless, twisted clone of Makoto. His face contorts into a demonic grin as he vows to weaponize Setsu to utterly crush his enemies. Meanwhile, his cowardly double shivers in the corner, totally blind to the faint, eerie glow pulsing from the origami butterfly. Cut to a towering skyscraper where Makoto stands tall, casually twirling a glowing, twin-paper butterfly between his fingers. A dark, satisfied smile creeps across his face as he promises a very swift reunion with Ima. The truth drops that innocent little origami is actually a high-level tracking talisman, and right now, Makoto is locked dead onto Ima's exact coordinates. The glowing beacon flickers and halts, just outside a massive compound, signaling a direct hit on the target. Confirming the turf belongs straight to the Ima Syndicate, he dives off the ledge into the night, ready to unleash pure chaos. Meanwhile, deep inside a lush botanical sanctuary, Nana silently inspects a patch of rare, spiritual herbs. Her eyes lock onto two glowing stalks that are mere moments away from a perfect harvest. She is plotting to pawn them off for a massive payout at the Cultivators Tournament in exactly 3 months. But suddenly, a chilling, unfamiliar presence creeps up the back of her. A shadowy monk materializes right behind her, dropping heavy lore. Nana used to be the unrivaled prodigy of the 100 Herb sect. Tragically, a devastating past attack completely shattered her core and wiped out all her cultivation powers. Impressive, he smirks, mocking her fading ability to detect spiritual aura. The moment those words leave his mouth, a chilling realization hits Nana. She is staring down a cultivator. Her heart races as another heavy aura fills the stifling room. It is an ambush. Fighting multiple enemies head-on, that is a guaranteed death sentence. A second monk steps from the shadows. He flashes a cruel grin, making it crystal clear that fighting back is pointless. "You are not walking out of here in one piece," he snarls. Playing for time, Nana forces herself to keep talking, probing for their... But beneath her calm facade, she inches silently toward the massive trunk of an ancient tree right... The first thug barks an order, demanding she surrender quietly and just come along. His partner cracks his knuckles. "Nah, let's just snap her legs." Makes transport so... Her back finally hits the bark. With a hidden flick of her wrist, she triggers a cluster of vibrant purple weeds, tangled in the roots the lethal Overlord flower. Instantly, a thick violet smog erupts from the petals, choking the enclosed space. The monks drop to their knees, desperately clawing at their burning throats. Nana just smirks, rolling a sprig of green heartgrass over her tongue. That toxic cloud could drop a fully grown elephant. While the two bald goons are busy suffocating, she prepares to make her clean getaway. But right as she pivots toward the exit, a suffocating, pitch-black presence blocks the doorway. The air turns freezing cold. Nana instantly recognizes the terrifying signature of shadow arts. The infamous hidden shadow set. A tendril of pure darkness shoots across the floor, violently binding. The shadowy assassin strides into the dim light, proudly boasting that his faction was the exact same one that utterly wiped out the 100 Herbs. Writhing against the dark bindings, Nana screams, "Who the hell are you?" This makes zero sense. The timeline is completely wrong. The Shadow Sect was not supposed to step into the light for a long, long time. She jerks her head up, and her blood runs entirely cold. Staring down at her is Makoto, or so it seems. In reality, it is just that snake Ima wearing Makoto's... Meanwhile, deep in the heart of the Ima family compound, the real Makoto melts into the darkness as the perimeter guards swap shifts. The brainless grunts bicker over their dinner plans, chuckling about their boss probably stuffing his face with a premium meal indoors. The second they turn the corner, Makoto vanishes. With a flawless execution of the Cloud Shadow Step, he ghosts through the perimeter. A glowing tracking talisman hums to life in his palm. Inside that very room, a pathetic body double aggressively slurps lukewarm instant noodles, glaring bitterly at a worn-out tape of his... "How did I sink this low?" he mutters. He is treated worse than a worthless stray dog, merely sharing a face with that rich brat. The endless mockery from the real Ima rings in his ears, fueling his rage. Shaking with frustration, he reaches out and rips open the mysterious gift box on the table. Bam! A hidden rune violently flares to life, scaring the living daylights out of him. The hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He whips around, and there stands Makoto, eyes completely dead. The terrified decoy shrieks, scrambling. Makoto tilts his head. "I know you. You are the cheap knockoff from the banquet, aren't you?" The trembling fake nods frantically, desperately threatening Makoto with the mighty Ima family name. But Makoto just scoffs. Skip the garbage, Makoto growls. Where's the real one? Fast forward to later that afternoon. Hiding in an alleyway along Makoto's daily commute, a pack of Ima's hired muscle eagerly waits to pull off their grand ambush. The leader practically brags into his burner phone, swearing to his boss that they are going to shatter Makoto's kneecaps and drag him back like a cheap takeout order. Like clockwork, a lookout whistles. The target is casually strolling right into their kill zone, but Makoto does not even glance their way. His mind is light years away, completely ignoring the thugs lurking. He is entirely consumed by a massive revelation. An actual spiritual vessel exists in this pathetic world. The implications are staggering. Could a supreme fourth-stage cultivator really be pulling the strings behind these arrogant nobles? You see, a spiritual vessel is not just some shiny trinket. It is a divine artifact, hammered into shape using pure concentrated spiritual essence. This incredibly dangerous forging process unlocks. The deadlier the aura pumped into the furnace, the more destructive the final weapon becomes. But here is the catch: forging something that monstrous. Only a legendary fourth-stage master could ever. Makoto is absolutely convinced that crafting mystical weapons in this realm is a total pipe dream, thanks to the laughably weak magical energy hanging in the air. But suddenly the puzzle pieces start falling into place, pointing straight at the notoriously shady Ima clan. It turns out, those elite, before trekking out to Ryuta to hunt down a mystical well of his own, he figures it is high time to finally bury his nasty grudge against the Ima bloodline. Right on cue, his train of thought: they have been stalking him in the shadows. With a cocky smirk, the goons brag about a serious cache to drag him in alive. Makoto does not even blink. Instead, his eyes narrow into a chilling deadpan glare. That single, freezing look sends a violent shiver straight. Swallowing his rising panic, the gang leader furiously screams at his grunts to charge. The thugs swarm forward like ravenous wolves lunging at fresh meat. Watching from the sidelines, the boss crosses his arms, totally certain his elite brawlers will mop the floor with this kid. A mere heartbeat later, that arrogant smirk completely vanishes into Makoto flows through the brawl like a phantom. He gracefully crushes jaws, snaps limbs, and hands out brutal facial reconstructions without breaking a single drop of sweat. In the blink of an eye, the terrifying street gang is reduced to a groaning, tangled. Paralyzed by pure dread, the leader watches Makoto pivot slowly, a dark aura swirling around him as he demands a name. Fast forward to the following morning. Setsu and her squad are tearing Nana's mansion apart, desperately hunting for any clue to explain the overnight chaos. A security agent waves her over, pointing at a grainy monitor. The screen displays two mysterious. Even though the recording goes dead a second later, the operative wagers his life on a grim theory. Nana was snatched right out of her own home. He flips to a second camera angle, showing a third shadowy assailant. Setsu's blood runs ice cold. Staring right back at her is Makoto. Boiling with explosive rage, she slams the laptop shut and peels out. Pacing in front of his apartment complex, a heavily bruised goon steps in her way, timidly mumbling something about needing a reservation. She brushes right past his broken body, barking out a fierce demand to drag the so-called. Trembling, the battered thug cowardly gestures toward the main door, escorting. Stepping onto the sunlit roof, her jaw drops. A crew of hardcore tattooed criminals are currently busy watering delicate flowers and trimming the hedges. Lounging like an absolute king, Makoto sips his drink while yesterday's tough mob boss scrambles to wait on his every need. It suddenly clicks. These sniveling gardeners, the exact same goon squad that spectacularly failed to take him down just 20. Marching straight up to his throne, Setsu explodes, screaming at him to hand over her beloved aunt immediately. He tilts his head, blinking in genuine bewilderment. Unfazed by his clueless act, she doubles down, roaring that he orchestrated the entire kidnapping. Frustrated by his blank stare, she violently shoves a glowing tablet into his chest, forcing him to watch the damning security tape. One glance is all it takes. Makoto's sharp eyes catch the unmistakable glow of a mystical relic. Someone is wearing his face like a cheap mask. It is a flawlessly engineered trap designed to spark a bloody war between him and the raging girl standing in front of him. Crackling with raw magical power, Setsu drops into a combat stance, ready to... Makoto does not even flinch. He softly points out that he was miles away fast asleep at 1 in the morning. Tossing his thumb toward the trembling mobsters, he invites her to cross-examine his new gardeners. Hearing their shaky alibis quickly extinguishes her fiery aura. The terrified boss fumbles for his phone, frantically scrolling through dirty text logs. The undeniable proof finally cools her jets. But she crosses her arms, demanding to know how they are going to debunk the flawless video. Without missing a beat, he pulls up his own secret weapon. A crystal-clear recording of Aima's personal... He had cleverly filmed the confession days ago, knowing full well that corrupt noble... Eyes glued to the screen, Setsu watches Yasuhiro crack under pressure, sobbing about his secret life as a decoy. The sniveling guard admits he usually just stands at doors, but was forced to crash the grand banquet wearing his master's face. The real kicker hits when the guard exposes an enchanted ring that lets the warlord steal anyone's identity. The bombshell completely rocks Setsu to her core. Stepping in, Makoto breaks down the terrifying mechanics behind these ancient mimicry artifacts. He casually drops the final truth bomb. The evil mastermind wants her to do his dirty work by assassinating Makoto over a fake kidnapping. Blinded by fury, she pivots on her heel to go butcher the noble. Makoto tightly grabs her shoulder, slamming the brakes on her suicide mission. He coldly warns that storming the castle right now guarantees Nana gets killed. Gritting her teeth, Setsu fiercely demands a better game plan, flat out refusing to just sit on her hands while her family suffers in the shadows. Makoto assures her they can easily flip the script, weaponizing his rival's twisted little mind games right back at him. Meanwhile, the actual Aima is busy flexing his newfound abilities, casually rubbing shoulders with the very same corrupt monks who snatched up Setsu's Aunt Nana. A bald fanatic leans in, whispering that draining the life force from the surviving members of the 100 Herbs sect will grant him absolute mastery over the dark shadow arts, elevating him into a true cultivant. Aima's eyes gleam with absolute malice, knowing that hitting that first stage of cultivation guarantees him an untouchable seat of power. With the elder council of the Aima family finally in his grasp, the heavyset monk practically drools with greed, showering the rich brat with endless, desperate gratitude. Just seconds later, a second zealot rushes over with juicy news. Makoto has finally been snatched up by the local underworld. Aima practically vibrates with sadistic glee, barking orders to drag his captive straight up to Kogen Temple, without a single scratch on him. He wants his new toy in pristine condition, planning to torture the guy a bit, before ending his miserable life right in front of Setsu's horrified eyes. His sick fantasy swooping in like the ultimate knight in shining armor, who magically caught her aunt's kidnapper bagging all the... Down at the temple gates, Aima's top dog, Haragaya, is busy throwing his weight around and barking out demands. He's driving his goons completely insane, right up until Aima struts onto the scene, puffing his chest out. Haragaya instantly tries to kiss up, but his boss coldly cuts him off, demanding every single guard smash their radios to pieces. He commands them to drag the helpless prisoner deep inside the temple grounds, right down to the shadowy foot of the mountain. Completely thrown off, Haragaya blinks in confusion, daring to question why they need to ditch their only lifelines. Aima simply erupts, unleashing a venomous roar that sends the terrified meathead sprinting off to do exact. But as he scurries away, alarm bells start ringing inside Haragaya's head. Something feels seriously off, especially since the young master completely failed to use his actual name. Just minutes later, Makoto is marched into the chilling temple courtyard, flanked by a remarkably suspicious, silent guard. He is dragged right into the center of the grounds to face... When Makoto calmly asks why he was kidnapped, the rich kid simply sneers, mocking him for acting way too arrogant back when they bumped heads at the gala. He starts spitting absolute venom, branding the captive a worthless piece of gutter trash, who never had the right to even breathe in Setsu's direction. Especially not right in front of his face. Catching a classic case of the villain's monologue, Aima runs his mouth like an idiot, eagerly bragging about his long list of dirty deeds. He boasts about relentlessly hunting his rival from the shadows, he even takes full credit for unleashing that completely unhinged psycho Hashimoto. Playing the perfect fool, Makoto keeps stringing him along, softly asking why anyone would go to such psychotic extremes. Aima's face contorts with explosive rage as he screams that a filthy peasant had absolutely no right holding the title of Setsu's fiancé. To him, the very thought was a permanent, disgusting stain on his flawless aristocrat. Sounding exactly like a completely deranged stalker, he fiercely claims ownership over Setsu, treating her like nothing more than a shiny, personal trophy waiting to be claimed. Barely hiding a smirk, Makoto chuckles at the pathetic confession, casually asking if a bruised ego is the only reason he is trying to put him in the dirt. But the lunatic shakes his head. Murder is just the warm-up. To prove his point, he instantly flares his spiritual energy, eager to show off. A grotesque, shadowy ghoul rips out of thin air as Aima arrogantly sneers that a pathetic loser could never dream of wielding such god. Makoto's eyes narrow coldly, analyzing the nasty creature as he tries to figure out exactly what kind of summoning trick this The chatterbox keeps spilling all his secrets, bragging that he is going to forcefully absorb Nana's shadow, since her pure life force is incredibly rare. He is fully convinced that draining her dry will instantly skyrocket him into a top-tier cultivator, cementing him as an absolute living. Leaning into the bait, Makoto practically begs the guy to just end him right then and there. But Aima gloats that he is saving the killing blow for Setsu's grand arrival. After all, his brilliant little master plan relies on her utterly believing that Makoto was the true monster who abducted her. The smug villain eagerly admits to planting the fake security footage on purpose, actively demonstrating exactly how he morphed his own features. He did it all just to frame his rival for the kidnapping. But instead of looking terrified, Makoto simply lets a chilling, knowing smile creep across his face. It is the terrifying look of a predator who just patiently waited for his prey to walk blindly into a mass. Aima frowns, massively let down by the underwhelming reaction. But a split second later, Makoto casually shatters his heavy restraints like they were made of cheap string. Without missing a beat, he turns to the masked guard standing right behind. The guard coldly nods, confirming she heard everything loud and clear, before ripping off her heavy disguise, leaving Aima totally paralyzed with horror. The guard is actually Setsu. She is practically boiling over with white-hot fury, completely devastated by the sickening truth that Aima was the one torturing. The sheer, crushing pressure of Setsu's raw, unfiltered rage violently detonates her spiritual energy, instantly freezing the air and causing snow to violently crash down around them. Realizing his grand scheme just went up in smoke, the snake scrambles to spin some absurd lie to save his own skin. Sweating bullets, he begs Setsu to chill out, swearing up and down that Nana is perfectly fine, claiming this whole mess was just one massive twisted. He desperately tries to backpedal on his previous threats, but that pathetic excuse only fuels Setsu's raging inferno as she violently demands her aunt's immediate release. Eyes burning with pure lethal intent, Setsu vows to completely eradicate Aima and wipe his entire bloodline off the map With his pathetic fantasy of playing the White Knight totally shattered, Aima completely loses it, barking furiously at Makoto but Makoto just stares him down coldly, pointing out that Aima dug his own grave the second he couldn't keep his massive trap shut. Twisting the knife even deeper, Makoto casually mocks him as a stereotypical brain-dead villain, which pushes Aima into a screaming blind rage. Taking a deep breath to steady her nerves, Setsu orders Makoto to fall back, revealing she has already called in the heavy hitters from the Hoshisu. She warns him that things are way above his pay grade right now, especially since a normal civilian has zero chance against a hardcore cultivator like Aima. Absolutely seething over losing his dream girl to Makoto's brilliant trap, Aima barks a vicious order for his combat monks to wipe the kid off the face. But Setsu instantly throws herself in front of Makoto, freezing the attackers in their tracks, while Aima snarls at her to seriously weigh the fatal consequences of choosing the wrong side. He practically hisses at her to step aside, cockily reminding her that he still holds her beloved aunt's life right in the palm of his hand. He ruthlessly threatens to end Nana with a single, simple phone call, forcing Setsu into a gut-wrenching ultimatum: save her family or save Makoto. Pure panic instantly washes over Setsu's gorgeous face as the crushing However, Makoto doesn't even flinch, He calmly leans in, assuring her that there is absolutely nothing to sweat over, because his own elite shadow squad. To prove it, he whips out his phone and flashes a crystal-clear photo of Nana, completely safe, and Aima's jaw practically hits the floor. Boiling with disbelief, he scrambles his brain trying to figure out how anyone ghosted through his supposedly impenetrable fortress. Panicking, he desperately pulls up the live security feed, only to find an agonizingly empty cell where Nana used to be. Flashback time. It turns out the version of Aima who casually, after flawlessly sweet-talking his way past the meathead guards and escorting Nana straight down, Yasuhiro smoothly excused himself, slipping away into the shadows. Even though he totally nailed the impersonation of the real Aima, the guy was secretly sweating bullets, terrified that Harigaya's sharp eyes would blow his cover. But after triple-checking his six to ensure he wasn't being trailed, Yasuhiro fired off a quick text to Makoto, confirming that their master plan was running perfectly on schedule. Back in the present, Aima's blood completely boils over. He finally pieces together that Yasuhiro stabbed him in the back, single-handedly torpedoing his glorious endgame. Meanwhile, Setsu is left totally speechless, absolutely awestruck by Makoto's insane four-dimensional chess moves. She can't help but stare at him, seriously questioning if, emitting pure, unadulterated rage, Aima screams at his combat monks to butcher Makoto, moving in to physically restrain Setsu himself. As the deadly Baldies rush forward, Setsu instantly prepares to throw hands, but Aima erupts with raw spiritual energy, brutally casting a binding spell over her. Paralyzed and unable to twitch a single muscle, she is forced to listen to Aima's sinister gloating as he commands her to watch her precious Makoto get ripped to absolute shreds. Desperately refusing to watch him die, Setsu screams at the top of her lungs for Makoto to run, but Aima just laughs, mocking that escape is completely impossible. He mercilessly rubs salt in the wound, thrashing her pride by calling her too pathetic and utterly. Those toxic words pierce right through Setsu's heart, drowning her in a sea of guilt for severely underestimating this psycho and dragging Makoto straight into the crossfire. But cut back to our boy Makoto. Standing dead in the center of the road, he doesn't even blink as these massive, bloodthirsty monks charge him down. They fully intend to flatline him right there. But in a mind-bending twist, Makoto casually snatches one attacker right by the skull, violently stomping the second one completely into the dirt. Activating his legendary Cloud Shadow Steps, Makoto literally mops the concrete with these two elite fighters, leaving Setsu totally paralyzed by his jaw-dropping display. A single devastating kick caves in the heavy-set monk, while the surviving attacker freezes in pure terror, utterly unable to comprehend how this random kid is casually outclassed. He questions everything, wondering how decades of brutal training and mystical talismans. Sadly for him, before his brain can even process the math, Makoto teleports right into his blind spot, instantly putting his lights out with one god-tier punch. Aima's arrogant smirk instantly vanishes. He is completely mortified by that terrifying speed, knowing damn well no normal. A cold sweat breaks out on his forehead as the terrifying realization finally hits him. Makoto isn't just some guy. Even Setsu's breath catches in her throat, her mind racing with the exact same shocking question, is the boy she... But Makoto isn't here to host a friendly Q&A session. Radiating pure chilling menace, he slowly closes the distance between him and a shaking... With a dark, icy glare, he finally breaks the silence. Makoto mercilessly lists off every single one of Aima's dirty sins, from trapping him in a locked cell with a deadly assassin to using Hashimoto as his personal hitman. But the true venom drips from his voice as he brings up the ultimate, unforgivable crimes, snatching his closest friend Shizuru and brutally taking the life. Aima trembles in pure panic as Makoto slowly closes the distance, radiating a suffocating spiritual aura. With an icy glare, Makoto admits he's been dying to grind him into the dirt because Aima has been buzzing around his neck like an annoying little gnat. Swallowing his fear, Aima grits his teeth and prepares to strike back, fully aware that this guy might just be an actual, real deal. He sparks up a dark technique he calls the Shadow Arts, bragging that he never meant to drop this trump card so early in the game, because the toll it takes is just way too brutal. The second his dark aura surges, Ima stretches out his shadows, violently draining the life force straight out of the two unconscious monks sprawled behind Makoto and Setsu. Watching the shadowy tendrils expand, Makoto's eyes narrow as he figures out the technique's energy transfer mechanism, quietly wondering if this crude parlor trick was actually cooked. Ima laughs like a total maniac, declaring he's turning the monks into his own personal battery packs. He gloats that absorbing just a single cultivator was all it took to perfect his dark art. But since he just hit the jackpot with two of them, the creep is absolutely ecstatic, screaming that his power level is about to shatter the ceiling. Leaving the monks completely drained, he violently flexes his dark swelling aura proudly, crowning himself a legendary Stage 1 power. Yet no matter how horrifying Ima's monstrous new form appears, Makoto just stands there absolutely bored and completely unfazed. Completely blind to reality, Ima assumes his target is dead meat, revving up to unleash the full, devastating force of his upgraded state. Meanwhile, Setsu is shaking like a leaf. Overwhelmed by Ima's suffocating presence, she silently curses herself for dragging Makoto into this absolute nightmare. Desperate to keep him breathing, she screams at Ima, demanding that he let the innocent guy walk away free, reminding the creep that this whole twisted feud stems from his sick obsession with her. But hearing his dream girl defend a perceived loser absolutely shatters Ima's fragile ego. Foaming at the mouth, he blocks out her cries and aggressively, while Setsu shrieks at the top of her lungs, begging Makoto to flee. Instead, Makoto stands still as a stone, letting Ima's explosive blast slam right. But as the smoke clears, jaws drop. Makoto had smoothly sidestepped the brutal blow with zero effort, leaving Ima blinking in total disbelief. Smirking coldly, Makoto openly mocks Ima's garbage Stage 1 aura, bluntly calling it pathetically weak. Then, with a casual, chilling snap of his fingers, he erupts with a monstrous, crushing spiritual gravity. The immense weight instantly makes Setsu realize that this mysterious guy operates on a completely different planet. In the blink of an eye, Makoto delivers a lightning-fast kick, sinking his foot so deep into Ima's gut that, gasping for air, Ima stubbornly refuses to throw in the towel. Blinded by absolute rage, he recklessly rockets toward Makoto, but Makoto just swats the shadowy energy away, like he's brushing off a piece. Desperate, Ima shoots out his shadowy threads, trying to siphon Makoto's life force directly. All the while, he spits bitter venom, who got brutally kicked to the curb by his own bloodline. Even that deep personal jab fails to make Makoto flinch. He effortlessly shatters the absorbed, openly branding the so-called shadow arts as pure, unadulterated. That single earth-shattering blow perfectly snags the sneaky spiritual parasite that was stealthily creeping up to drain his core. Turns out this grand shadow art simply relies on nasty little spirit bugs acting as leeches to steal energy. But with a mere squeeze of his fingers, Makoto squashes the creepy crawler into fine dust, instantly and permanently neutralizing Ima's supposedly unstoppable power. The brutal backlash shatters Ima's sanity. Bawling like an absolute coward, he wildly screams, demanding to know how a disgraced outcast could possibly mop the floor with him. Unable to swallow the bitter pill of losing to someone he views as peasant trash, Ima desperately shifts gears, loudly flexing his family's terrifying influence. He starts aggressively running his mouth, bragging that his great-grandfather is an He vehemently warns Makoto that his elder, a high-ranking master of the Hidden Shadow sect, will ruthlessly hunt down anyone who dares to scratch him. Catching that little detail, Makoto's eyes glint with realization. His earlier suspicions are confirmed. Genuine high-level cultivators actually do roam around this modern realm. Misinterpreting Makoto's thoughtful silence for sheer terror, a smug, arrogant grin crawls right. He thoroughly convinces himself that dropping his family's name just bought him a golden ticket. Feeling practically invincible, he starts shooting off his big mouth again. But his cocky smile vanishes instantly when Makoto simply ignores the sweating actual bullets. Ima keeps barking out hollow threats, desperately praying that his heavy name-dropping will eventually force Makoto. When the intimidation tactic completely flops, the horrifying reality finally clicks. He just poked the wrong bear. Dropping the tough guy act, instantly he dropped. but Makoto is completely deaf to the pathetic whining. Deciding to take out the trash once and for all, he launches a merciless attack with a single colossal punch that generates a massive windstorm, nearly blowing Setsu straight. As the heavy debris finally settles, Makoto casually dusts off his hands and drops some solid news. He calmly informs Setsu that he got the confirmation her Aunt Nana has been safely at the prestigious Hoshisu clan. Overwhelmed with pure gratitude, Setsu deeply thanks him openly, confessing her absolute shock. She admits she totally, but deep down in her chest, a massive wave of embarrassment washes over her. She feels like an absolute clown for ever looking down on a literal and for foolishly stepping up to play his knight in shining. Makoto calms her nerves, making it crystal clear that even without her interference, he was entirely prepared to crush Ima single-handedly. Flashing a knowing smirk, he reveals his true prize, snatching a gleaming ring straight from Ima's lifeless hand, a powerful vessel brimming with raw spiritual energy. Inspecting the band closely, Makoto's eyes narrow as he recognizes the craftsmanship. This rare artifact could only be forged by a Stage 4 master. Baffled by his hidden strength, Setsu demands to know why the Yamori clan ever banished someone so unbelievably overpowered. She points out that if he flaunted even a tiny sliver of that devastating potential, he could effortlessly claim the throne as the family's absolute patriarch. But Makoto swiftly shoots down the idea, stating coldly that he has zero interest in rubbing shoulders with. He goes on to clarify that true power is still out of reach until he breaks through to the third tier of cultivation, pushing his limits to unlock an entirely new realm of devastation. Sparked by his fiery ambition, Setsu clenches her fists, swearing to claw her way to the very top, no matter the grueling cost. Her ultimate goal: shatter the suffocating chains of the Amatani family, and forge her own destiny as a legitimate martial artist. A heavy beat of silence hangs in the air before Makoto suddenly produces a glowing pill offering a permanent cure to her crippled physique. Honoring his earlier promise, he introduces the medicine as a spirit-dispersing pill, designed to purge the chaotic, raging energy destroying her from the inside out. The revelation hits Setsu like a punch to the gut, dread washing over her as she realizes that taking it would violently crush her lifelong dream of ascending as a master cultivator before she even steps onto the battlefield. Makoto doesn't sugarcoat the brutal truth. Her reckless training has permanently shattered her foundation, and if she refuses the cure, her life will be drastically cut short. Even staring death in the face, she agonizes over the choice, terrified that swallowing the medicine will strip away her magic entirely, reducing her to a powerless mortal. Yet Makoto smirks, completely catching her off guard when he drops a massive bombshell. Wiping her slate clean is actually the crucial first step to unlocking the terrifying reality of true, unadulterated cultivation. Fast forward a few days, and Setsu drags her massive suitcases up to Makoto's doorstep, shivering and looking like an absolutely adorable rain-soaked stray puppy. Blushing fiercely, she mumbles that she's officially moving in with him, as they originally agreed upon. But our hopelessly dense protagonist, operating with absolutely zero romantic awareness, just stares blankly and genuinely demands to know why her face is glowing like a tomato. He legitimately asks if it's a toxic side effect from her busted spiritual veins. Mortified, Setsu frantically waves her hands, insisting she is perfectly fine, before aggressively shoving him right back through the front door. Shortly after, as he gives her a quick tour of the massive estate, she notices his packed bags and asks if he's leaving town. Makoto nods, casually dropping that he has no clue when he will actually return. With the lethal threat of Ima permanently erased from the board, he is setting his sights on the distant lands of Ryuta to hunt down the mythical Spirit Spring. Stepping out into the lush courtyard, Makoto points to a patch of shimmering silver heart grass, a rare plant, radiating a soothing, magical aura. He heavily advises her to meditate right beside it, noting its healing vibrations will work wonders for her. Before hitting the road, he vows to give her a crash course in authentic cultivation, entrusting her with the strict duty of watering the magical herb and keeping an eye on his loyal furry companion. Setsu's eyes instantly light up at the sight of the fluffy pup, genuinely shocked that a ruthless, stone-cold killer like Makoto would harbor such an overwhelmingly cute pet. But when she cheerfully asks for its name, Makoto completely freezes up, genuinely bewildered, because he never even bothered to give the little guy one. Pouting Setsu lectures him that an identity is crucial for absolutely any living soul, firmly demanding he crown the animal immediately. Without skipping a beat, Makoto dubs the tiny beast Roku, and almost on cue, the puppy barks happily, perfectly embracing its new title. A quiet melancholy washes over Makoto's face as he stares intensely at the animal, deeply swept away by a lingering ancient memory of the original legendary Roku from his past life. Later that evening, freshly showered and exhausted, Setsu asks where she will be crashing, to which he casually directs her to the spare bedroom, mentioning he already scrubbed the entire space spotless. Shifting to serious business, she questions his master plan for dealing with the vicious Ima syndicate, now that their golden boy is rotting in the ground. But Makoto doesn't bat an eye, coldly stating the loose ends are already tied. He drops a chilling guarantee that the world will remain utterly oblivious to the heir's brutal demise. Meanwhile, deep inside the heavily fortified Ima stronghold, the entire bloodline desperately gathers nervously, anticipating the grand... True to Makoto's terrifying word, the shapeshifter Yasuhiro has seamlessly stolen the dead heir's identity. Even the current acting boss, Tetsu, casually chats him up, completely blind to the imposter standing right in front of him. Yet beneath his perfect disguise, Yasuhiro is secretly sweating bullets. Suddenly, heavy stone doors loudly grind open, sending shockwaves through the crowd as the legendary great-grandfather Takuzu finally emerges in jaw-dropping fashion, mounted atop a monstrous, bloodthirsty beast, after disappearing into intense, solitary training for 5 grueling years. Bowing deeply, Tetsu eagerly welcomes the fearsome elder back, loudly praising his monumental achievement of finally shattering the third. He lays the flattery on thick, hyping Takuzo up as some legendary immortal. A massive compliment the old man completely eats up. Spotting Ima, Takuzo cuts right to the chase, demanding a strict update on the Makoto assassination plot. The fake Ima visibly panics. He stumbles over his words, confessing his total failure to eliminate the target, and pathetically blaming it on his own worthless ordinary skills. That weak excuse makes Takuzo's blood boil. He aggressively reminds the boy that weakness is an absolute sin in their bloodline. Threatening to strip away his title as the reigning heir, the patriarch decides to step up and handle the messy situation personally. Takuzo immediately summons his heavy hitters Jogo and Shikage, 2 deadly operatives from the elite Hidden Shadow sect. His brutal command is crystal clear. Bring him Makoto's severed head, no matter the cost. Off to the side, the fake Ima is sweating bullets. He knows the sudden involvement of an absolute powerhouse like Takuzo could shatter their entire scheme into pieces. Fast forward to the crack of dawn the next day. Setsu is whining about being dragged out of bed at such an ungodly hour, completely spoiled by her usual luxurious, pampered princess routine. Makoto smoothly shuts down her complaints, pointing out that ambient spiritual energy hits its absolute peak right at sunrise, meaning they can double their gains with half the effort. Without missing a beat, he hands her a mysterious beverage. Setsu downs the liquid in one go, only to physically gasp as a refreshing surge. Makoto casually drops that it is basically a watered-down version of the intense medicinal pill he slipped her earlier. He clarifies that a liquid format is much safer for her system right now, since popping those high-grade pills daily would completely overload her fragile core, because her body desperately requires a much softer flow of energy. He literally blended a tiny sliver of the medicine with some everyday greens to dilute the intensity. Honestly, back in his past life, this exact recipe was literally but Makoto had to resort to it simply because the physical limits of humans in this modern era are ridiculously brittle. With breakfast out of the way, he tells Setsu to gear up. It is finally time to show her what authentic cultivation actually looks like. Cut to a few minutes later, and they are standing dead center in a public park. Setsu is practically dying of embarrassment as random joggers stare at them like absolute. She desperately whispers, asking if they seriously have to do this out in the glaring open. Makoto brushes off her anxiety explaining that these lush nature... Before long, a small crowd of nosy grandpas clusters nearby, openly staring and gossiping about whether the two are practicing some weird martial arts. A few of the old-timers even chuckle loudly, praising them as a quirky young couple, just indulging in each other's nerdy little hobbies. Catching that comment, Setsu's face instantly flares beet red. She frantically wonders how standing like statues could ever be mistaken for a romantic date. Makoto quickly catches her wandering gaze and sharply snaps her back to reality, demanding absolute pinpoint focus. He breaks it down for her, and she has to slowly, naturally sense the ambient aura drifting around her, rather than aggressively trying to snatch it. That reckless, forceful pulling was exactly what shattered her internal pathways in the first. Digging deeper, Makoto explains that the human anatomy actually has a built-in defense mechanism designed to repel wild spiritual currents. But Setsu completely bypassed those natural barriers, with her stubborn brute force training, flooding her own veins with wildly volatile and destructive power. True cultivation, he notes, is fundamentally about filtering that incoming aura until it is crystal clear, allowing perfectly purified essence to deeply nourish and revitalize the flesh. Looking right at her, Makoto states that the only real gap between their power levels is simply their efficiency in managing that flow. While the so-called elite masters of this modern era can barely tap into 40% of the ambient aura they absorb, Makoto's ancient, flawless technique captures and utilizes a full 100% of it. Shifting back to the lesson, he instructs the girl to gently guide the flowing currents using her pure willpower, drawing it straight into the spiritual center. He firmly advises her to just sit with the sensation, truly feeling the hum of the atmosphere, before trying to pull anything inside. But the second Setsu tries to apply the technique, she hits a massive, invisible wall. Cold sweat drips down her face, as even the peanut gallery of grandpas on the sidelines instantly tense up, sensing something. They can clearly see her grimacing, drenched in sweat. And, without warning, Makoto reaches out, pressing his fingers firmly against her brow, snapping her out of the dangerous trance with a jolt. Leaning in dangerously close, he softly murmurs, telling her to shut her eyes and take it from the top. He patiently guides her mind, mapping out exactly how to wield her consciousness to detect the flow. But Setsu's brain is practically short-circuiting. His intense, breathless proximity makes it utterly impossible to hear a single word he says. Still, she squeezes her eyes shut in compliance, while the eavesdrop... Just minutes into watching the pair, it finally clicks for Setsu. She taps into the unseen realm, feeling the raw, spiritual aura pulsing around her, guided entirely by Makoto's overwhelming psychic presence, an experience that leaves her utterly spellbound, making it impossible for ordinary human eyes to perceive it. Wrapping up the session, the young master seals off Setsu's spiritual gateway, bringing their grueling practice to a close. He then casually drops a bombshell: if she continues drawing in this ambient force, hitting the first stage of chi refinement is practically guaranteed, assuming she strictly follows his methods. However, stepping through her front door, later Setsu's mind races. She cannot shake the lingering memory, obsessing over how intimately close Makoto's face hovered next to hers just moments ago. Flustered and blushing, she fiercely shakes her head, vowing to pour her rather than getting tangled up in silly romantic distraction. Fast forward 7 days. Makoto packs his gear, setting his sights on the rugged terrains of Ryuta to hunt down a legendary mystical spring. Reaching the designated pickup spot, he finds the dirt road completely deserted. Not a single soul in sight, which makes him click his tongue, wondering if he just showed up way ahead of thanks to an entire week of relentless grind. So Makoto hit the road, with total peace of mind, fully trusting her to break through to the first tier single-handedly. Plus, her newfound skills make her the perfect guard dog. He feels completely safe leaving his priceless herbs and his under her watch. Meanwhile, out by the dusty road, a beat-up transport bus finally screeches to a halt, and our hero calmly steps aboard, while the driver narrows his eyes, shooting the kid a deeply skeptical glare. Why would a high schooler travel to such a notorious death trap? Shrugging it off, the grumpy wheelman barks at him to just grab any open spot, and Makoto silently scans the shady passengers. Finding a quiet corner in the back, he settles in, letting the engine's hum carry him toward his Ryuta expedition. Cutting back to the neon-lit city, Takuzo's lethal enforcers, Jogo and Shikage, touch down. Jogo smirks proudly, declaring he already tracked down Makoto's exact coordinates, so the only thing left on their agenda is a swift, bloody execution. A twisted, sadistic grin stretches across his face. He is practically foaming at the mouth for this hit, craving a thrill he had since he last played such a delightfully wicked game. Miles away, Shizuru spaces out at her luxurious desk, completely consumed by thoughts of Makoto. Her delicate fingers gently trace the enchanted beaded bracelet which he had slipped into her hand as a protective charm right before embarking on his journey. He had painstakingly etched ancient runes into every single bead, detailing exactly how to activate its defensive magic if lethal threats. Suddenly, her secretary Ogata snaps her back to reality, with a loud throat clear shattering the daydream. The assistant sighs, pointing out that she had been pitching a whole report while her boss was utterly hypnotized by a piece of jewelry. Ogata flashes a sly, teasing grin, poking fun at the CEO by noting that the bracelet must be insanely special, just because a certain boy gave it to her. Turning beet red, Shizuru barks a playful but terrifying threat to ship her off to an African diamond mine. The terrified assistant immediately drops to her knees. Fast forward 6 agonizing hours into Makoto's bumpy highway journey, where he remains a statue, his sharp gaze coldly analyzing every single. Out of nowhere, the brakes screech violently. The bus jerks to a dead stop, sending angry passengers flying forward and screaming insults at the terrified. The driver stammers out an apology, but before he can finish, the metal doors are brutally pried open. A gang of ruthless thugs swarms in, gripping gleaming razor-sharp machetes. Recognizing the gang colors of the notorious Hanadate Syndicate, the panicked driver desperately shouts that this vehicle pays heavy protection fees, run by a mob boss named Kamaguchi. Sadly, his words are cut terribly short by a ruthless blade sinking deep into his gut, throwing the entire cabin into absolute screaming chaos. Ripping the bloody blade out, the thug commander roars for everyone to step outside, snarling that they are hunting a specific target. He promises a brutal slaughter for anyone foolish enough to resist their aggressive shakedown. Peeking through his lashes, Makoto calmly watches the nightmare unfold. His calculating mind instantly links the raid to a nervous, hoodie-wearing passenger clutching a heavy briefcase. Sinking lower into his seat, Makoto tries to blend into the shadows, to dodge another pointless drama. But one of the machete-wielding goons locks eyes with him and barks a harsh order, demanding the kid get on his feet. Deeming the quiet teen way too calm for a hijacking, the brute demands Makoto's bag for an... But the young master does not even flinch, treating the... Losing his patience, the gang leader shouts a grim command: just butcher the silent kid, rather than burning precious seconds on useless negotiations. Flashing a wicked sneer, the grunt swings his heavy steel blade down to split Makoto in half. But his triumphant smirk instantly vanishes. The thug stands there, totally bewildered, as a faint gust of wind brushes past his neck. Before he can even process the sudden chill, Makoto materializes from the absolute darkness, dropping the guy cold with one devastating strike. Glaring at the rest of the crew, he dares them to attack him all at once. They lunge, but it is totally useless. Makoto completely massacres the entire group in a blur of motion, and literally punches a dude's head clean off his shoulders. The hooded target just stands there absolutely paralyzed by the sheer violence. Once they drag the lifeless thugs out of the bus, a frantic passenger pops the hood, desperately trying to get the engine running. But his heart sinks. The engine block is completely trashed, way beyond a quick "damn it." Another guy mutters, the grim reality setting in. They are totally marooned deep in the lethal woods with zero cell service and no way out, especially if a bloodthirsty monster decides to crash. Panic spreads like wildfire among the survivors. Meanwhile, Makoto hangs back in the shadows, calmly watching the chaos unfold while calculating his next step. Sure, he could easily survive the trek back alone, but making it all the way to Ryuta, he definitely needs a local to show him the ropes. Just then, the mysterious hooded figure approaches, cutting a quick deal. Safe passage in exchange for absolute protection. Makoto shoots the idea down in a heartbeat. But the stranger is stubborn, stepping closer to sweeten the pot. Makoto cuts through the nonsense, pointing out that those thugs were clearly after the mysterious briefcase. As far as he is concerned, this stranger has zero. Throwing a bone-chilling glare, Makoto forces the stranger to choke back their words. But as Makoto turns to walk away, the figure frantically blocks his path and rips off the heavy cloak, revealing the face of a desperate, stunning young woman. "I'm Fuyu," she breathes out, locking eyes with him. She wagers that his trip to Ryuta has absolutely nothing to do with chasing a paycheck. With a sudden burst of confidence, she flashes a tiny glass vial, swirling with glowing spirit water. "Is this what you're after?" she asks. Back at the crash site, the roar of heavy engines cuts through the tension as a pair of rugged Land Rovers suddenly roll up. A wave of massive relief washes over the stranded crowd. They excitedly assume Kamaguchi's rescue team has finally arrived. But the second an eager passenger runs toward the lead truck, bang! A sniper round drops him dead in the dirt. The heavy door swings open, and the ruthless boss Hanadate steps out into the clearing. With a twisted grin, he shatters their hope, declaring that Kamaguchi is absolutely not coming to their rescue. Right then, Hanadate's goons drag over the lone survivor from the earlier bloodbath. Trembling, the battered thug begs his boss for mercy. But Hanadate coldly ignores the apologies, demanding Fuyu's exact location. The bleeding lackey stammers that he has no clue, frantically explaining that a total monster completely wiped out his entire squad. Hanadate scoffs at the absurd claim, pressing a barrel to the guy's head and promising a slow demise if he is lying. Desperate to live, a trembling passenger quickly backs up and eagerly offers to point out Makoto and Fuyu's escape trail, begging for a ride out of this hellhole in return. Sensing a golden ticket, the rest of the cowardly crowd immediately chimes in, completely selling out the duo. One guy even blurts out that the mysterious cloaked traveler was definitely a girl, claiming he could tell. Hanadate's wicked smile grows wider. Enjoying the pathetic display, he motions for the snitches to keep. A nervous civilian confidently points a finger directly down the dirt path the pair vanished into, quickly adding that the vicious predators lurking nearby might have already ripped them to shreds. But one of Hanadate's sharp-eyed lieutenants chimes in, guessing that Fuyu is likely making a desperate dash to the nearest settlement to track down a specific contact named Kunieda. Without wasting another second, Hanadate barks at his heavily armed crew to roll out toward the village, leaving the desperate civilians screaming and begging for salvation, crying out that they upheld their end of the bargain. But Hanadate just smirks, giving his merciless hitman a subtle nod to wipe every single. The terrifying click of safety off echoes through the trees. The crowd freezes in pure, unadulterated horror, the fatal price of cutting a deal with the absolute devil himself. While blood-curdling shrieks echo through the dark canopy, Fuyu and Makoto quietly slip into the safety of the bustling frontier town. Fuyu shoots him a dead-serious look, strictly warning him to keep his lethal abilities totally hidden unless it is life or death. When Makoto questions the extreme caution, she makes it that flashing that kind of strength will attract all the wrong kind of heat. On top of that, showing his cards would totally blow his cover, since wielding such an insane aura practically broadcasts that he knows the deep dark truth behind the mystical spirit water painting a massive target right on his back. Makoto gives a quiet nod, agreeing to lay low. Suddenly, Fuyu's eyes light up as she spots a grizzled old man in the crowd. Kunieda, the exact target she has been hunting for. The old veteran is a legendary smuggler renowned for secretly hauling wanderers straight into the heart of Ryuta. Fuyu rushes over, desperately asking for a fast-tracked ride. Flashing a knowing grin, Kunieda casually reveals that his rig is already gassed up and ready to hit the road. Fuyu leans in and assures Makoto that Kunieda pulls major strings around here and knows the absolute safest path to reach Ryuta. She guarantees this guy is completely solid, pointing out that he has even risked his own neck to smuggle survivors out of Ryuta before. Kunieda motions for them to step inside his shop and lay low for a minute, but before anyone can take a step, a pack of greedy gamblers swarms the place, screaming for Kunieda to cough up his unpaid debts. The thugs boldly threaten to repossess his transport trucks, which were apparently put up as collateral. Makoto immediately goes on high alert, his gut screaming that this little detour is about to turn into a massive headache. Kunieda practically begs the mob boss Yamai to back off and give him some breathing room. But the ruthless thug refuses to budge an inch without his cash. Fuyu watches in total disbelief, knowing damn well that Kunieda despises gambling and would never gamble away his precious vehicles. Pushed to his absolute limit, Kunieda snaps, screaming at Yamai for playing dirty when he hit rock bottom and desperately needed a lifeline. The mobster reveals that Kunieda borrowed 10 million yen from their underground casino just to pay for his wife's medical treatments. Hearing this tragic twist, Fuyu realizes the clock is ticking. If they lose Kunieda's wheels, they will just be sitting ducks waiting for Hanadate to slaughter them. So Fuyu boldly steps up and offers to clear the debt herself. Kunieda frantically tries to wave her off, but Fuyu absolutely refuses to back down. She is completely out of time and tells him he can just pay her back whenever. With a wicked grin, Yamai whips out the contract and starts reading off the absolutely insane loan conditions. The document details a completely predatory interest rate that skyrockets with every passing sunrise. Since 15 days have dragged by since the initial, Fuyu's blood boils at the sheer extortion, while Kunieda furiously screams that he never agreed to those ridiculous numbers. Totally unfazed by their anger, Yamai offers a twisted compromise. If they cannot cough up the cash, they can settle it at the gambling table. The mobster promises to wipe the slate completely clean, but only if Fuyu can defeat their undisputed champion dealer William. But Yamai dangles the bait, making it even spicier by threatening to double Kunieda's massive debt if Fuyu loses the match. Fuyu agonizes over the brutal ultimatum. If they walk away without settling the loan, the trucks get repossessed, and her crucial mission to Ryu. Even though she can smell a trap from a mile away, Fuyu is absolutely convinced she can crush this guy just by decoding the sound of the rattling dice. After all, she spent her entire childhood rigorously training her ears to track the exact movements of falling dice. Supremely confident that she has the ultimate edge, Fuyu locks eyes with the mobster and firmly accepts the stakes. Kunieda tries to intervene one last time, but her mind is totally made up, and Yamai seals. Minutes later, the tension in the room is thick enough to cut with a knife, as both sides sit down ready to win by sheer talent or dirty tricks. Off to the side, Makoto remains dead silent. He already knows this entire setup is totally rigged against Fuyu, and he is well aware that William is not just some lucky amateur. He is a terrifying gambling prodigy. Makoto's instincts are dead on. William has been rolling dice since he was in diapers, making his sleight of hand borderline supernatural. The smug dealer thinks crushing a rookie like Fuyu will be a total cakewalk, especially since he is packing a hidden rigged button gifted by his mentor. He keeps this deceptive little gadget cleverly concealed right up his sleeve. The showdown kicks off as Fuyu gives the dice a fierce shake, and William smugly offers her the first call between even or odd. Yamai and his goons jeer from the sidelines, but Fuyu keeps her cool. She tells the thugs to save their laughter for later, closing her eyes to intensely analyze the clattering cubes. The split second the dice smack the felt, her trained ears decode the result. She instantly calls, even while William lazily bets on odd. She lifts the cup and boom, the total is perfectly even, validating her razor-sharp senses. Kunieda lets out a massive sigh of relief, suddenly believing Fuyu might actually pull off this miracle. But Yamai and his crew just sneer, warning the duo that popping champagne right now is a terrible idea. William intensely commands Fuyu to roll again. She shakes the cup with newfound swagger, firmly reminding the mobster. The instant the dice crash onto the table, she does not hesitate for a second. A sinister smirk creeps across William's face as he subtly twitches his sleeve, a tiny movement that instantly tips Makoto off that the cheating is about to begin. Brimming with cocky energy, William boldly calls triples, grinning like he just hit the ultimate jackpot. Kunieda's stomach drops. Calling triples is an insane risk because the actual odds are ridiculously slim. Certain of her victory, Fuyu dramatically lifts the cup, but her jaw drops in pure horror when she sees 3 identical sixes staring back at her exactly as William. In a heartbeat, her fierce confidence shatters into a million pieces. fully aware that William was rigging the entire game, pushing for the kill. William goads Fuyu into taking the final round. Sweating bullets, she narrows her eyes, pouring all her focus into the game so she doesn't mess up again. But the second those dice rattle against the wood, her nerves completely shatter. Swallowing her fear, she bets on odd. Yamai's thugs immediately burst into cruel laughter, jeering at her while hyping up William's supposedly unbeatable talent. Off to the side, William flashes a wicked smirk, knowing damn well that talent has absolutely nothing to do with it. Armed with his dirty little secret, he was basically the undisputed god of the casino. Smug as ever, he calls, even instantly sending Fuyu spiraling into total panic. Her trembling hand reaches for the cup, but Makoto suddenly intercepts her, instantly wiping the smug grins off the goons' faces. Stepping up to the plate, Makoto coldly announces he will be playing this final hand, leaving William raising an eyebrow in sheer confusion. Fuyu frantically whispers that William isn't some average street gambler. Makoto just nods, calmly revealing that the scammer is exactly the same. Her jaw drops, the horrifying realization setting in. William is a cultivator too. Sensing his easy payday slipping away, Yamai aggressively barks at Makoto to back the hell up, flat out refusing any late substitutions. Not even blinking, Makoto throws down the ultimate bait, slamming a bank card loaded with over 2 million yen right onto the felt. The greedy boss practically drools at the sight of the cash, instantly choking back his pride and giving Makoto the green light. He lays out the terms one more time. If Makoto somehow pulls off a miracle, Kunieda walks away debt-free. But if he tanks, they owe double the initial amount, plus they forfeit that massive 2 million yen deposit. Unfazed by the massive stakes, William arrogantly locks in his even bet. Makoto doesn't flinch. Instead, he drops a... The entire room erupts into howling laughter, completely mocking the kid for chasing odds that are mathematically impossible. Sweating buckets, Kunieda and Fuyu frantically try to talk him off the ledge, while William's ice-cold Makoto firmly stands his ground, staring right through them, as he demands they roll the damn dice. Sneering, William gestures for him to lift the lid, his fingers already brushing against the hidden button sewn into his cuff. A wicked smile stretches across his face, as a pulse of raw, spiritual energy, completely invisible to normal. That little gadget channels his aura, letting him manipulate anything within a 50-meter radius. Forcing the dice to land however he wants is literal child's play. Absolutely certain the trap is sprung, he practically gloats as he tells Makoto to reveal the slaughter. The cup lifts. The room freezes. Staring up from the felt are odd triples, exactly what the kid called. Dead silence suffocates the room, until one of Yamai's thugs violently snaps, screaming that Makoto rigged the roll. Losing his absolute mind, William points and, blinded by rage, William aggressively fires back, roaring that absolutely nobody lands triples while he is running the table. And just like that, he completely exposes himself, practically screaming a full confession that he controls the dice. Without missing a beat, he openly exposes the hidden trigger strapped to William's sleeve. Looking down on him, Makoto mocks the pathetic little magic trick. William goes completely pale, his brain short-circuiting as he frantically wonders how this random kid cracked his flawless system. Meanwhile, a vein throbs in Yamai's forehead as he furiously demands to know and blasts the whole crew for setting up a dirty game. But William refuses to just walk away with his bruised ego. Like a pathetic, sore loser, he decides to show this kid the bloody consequences of crossing a cultivator. Channeling a violent burst of energy through his cuff, he launches a lethal barrage of flying daggers straight at Makoto's chest. But in a horrifying twist, the teen practically teleports through the blades, seizing William by the throat before anyone can even blink. Lifting the scammer off the floor, Makoto softly reminds him of the bet. Coldly demanding the... Choking for air, William frantically screams at his boss to hand over the papers. When the mobsters just stand there frozen, he shrieks again, raw, unfiltered terror pouring from his eyes. Yamai watches in absolute shock, utterly baffled by how this high and mighty prodigy is suddenly begging for his life against a teenager. But when his star player hysterically shrieks that they are all going to die, Yamai finally caves, the terrifying reality. This wasn't just a hustle anymore. tearing the contract from their trembling hand, and delivers one final bone-chilling warning. Pack up the goons and get the hell out of his sight. William furiously nods along, his entire body shivering uncontrollably, like a cornered stray. Watching the cowards scatter, Fuyu shoots Makoto a bewildered look, demanding to know what on earth he did to spook William so badly. But Makoto just shrugs casually, claiming total innocence. Often in their arrogant minds, there is absolutely no way one lone guy could ever pose a real threat. William, however, is still locked in a cold sweat, agonizing over how an old geezer like Kunieda managed to recruit a total monster. He stares down in pure disbelief at his shredded sleeve. His mind races, trying to comprehend how Makoto completely obliterated his hidden gadget, a device supposedly toughened. Tucking his tail between his legs, William bolts into the distance, silently vowing to never cross paths with that nightmare again. Meanwhile, Hanadate and his heavily armed mercenaries are completely dug in, patiently waiting to ambush Fuyu. He barks at a subordinate for a status update, and the flunky eagerly reassures him that Kunieda's transport fleet is guaranteed to roll right through this exact canyon on their path to the city. A sadistic smirk twists Hanadate's face as he admires a hyper-expensive state of inside those vehicles. Fast forward to the next morning, Kunieda warmly expresses his gratitude to Makoto and Fuyu for saving his hide from those filthy loans. Fuyu quickly waves off the praise, insisting that he is the real lifesaver. She then turns a grateful smile toward Makoto, thanking him for stepping up and crushing William's dirty little cheating scheme. But Makoto keeps it brutally honest, casually admitting he only intervened because he really needed the wheels. That sparks Kunieda's pride. He puffs out his chest, bragging non-stop about his flawless mechanical babies and his 50-year streak of dominance. Caught up in the hype, the old man even volunteers to personally chauffeur them across the wastelands, but Fuyu playfully shoots him down, gently reminding the veteran that his glory days of hardcore driving. Moments later, the massive transport fleet revs its engines. Kunieda gives them a warm salute as the heavy-duty trucks rumble away into the dust. Once they settle, and Makoto cuts right to the chase. Fuyu sighs, her expression turning serious. She reveals that she drops the bombshell that Hanadate's relentless manhunt is entirely fueled by whatever hidden secrets are locked inside this very case. Makoto raises an eyebrow, demanding to know the contents. Fuyu just shakes her head, admitting she is completely clueless. She only knows that a powerful cultivator deep in the back of that exact same transport, a shady hooded guy named Chino, is desperately trying to sweet-talk his way into the good graces of his incredibly wealthy travel companions, Rei and Eris, the ultra-elite heiresses of the Ryuto group. Leaning in close, Chino whispers for Rei to keep her guard up. He fiercely claims that the entire passenger cabin is packed with nothing but bloodthirsty criminals. Rei gasps, completely taken aback. She innocently asks how he could possibly read a stranger's true nature with just a single glance. Flashing a cocky smirk, Chino brags that he is the sole heir to an ancient to peer directly into the darkest corners of the human soul. To prove his ridiculous point, he starts pointing out random passengers dramatically diagnosing their so-called hidden sins. He trashes absolutely everyone on board, even going so far as to label a frail, sweet-looking old granny as a ruthless, underground scammer. He does not spare Fuyu either, loudly writing her. To her eyes, these folks are just ordinary travelers. But Chino leans in, drip, and the sole key to finding the legendary cultivator she seeks. He keeps piling on the lies, flexing that his grandmaster was a god-tier warrior, and insisting he is only guiding Rei out of pure, unselfish charity. However completely hidden from the naive heiress, Chino is a total fraud. The filthy con artist is only buttering her up, because her bloodline, the almighty Ryuto group, practically owns the entire nation, as its supreme. In reality, he thinks cultivators are just fairy tales, and he is fully prepared to string them along for a massive payday. For now, his manipulative game is working flawlessly. Rei showers, her eyes sparkling with hope at the thought of finally meeting a Makoto has been chilling with his eyes shut the entire trip, yet that deadpan, unbothered aura is triggering massive alarm bells in Chino's head. He is terrified. Chino scoffs under his breath, desperately wishing for a chance to humiliate Makoto and assert dominance, And right on cue, as if the universe heard his arrogant prayer, a massive tree trunk suddenly crashes down across the highway, violently derailing the lead transport truck. Brakes squeal as the rest of the fleet slams to a chaotic halt. Screams echo through the cabin as Hana, Date, and his heavily armed kill squad slowly step out from the dark tree line. Brandishing heavy blades, the thugs force every single passenger to step out of their vehicles. Meanwhile, Hanadate's top lieutenant verifies that this caravan. The lackey guarantees his boss that Fuyu is absolutely hiding inside one of the trucks right alongside the dude who aided her getaway. Even though the henchman never caught a glimpse of Makoto's face, he promises Hana Date they can flush him out by inspecting every single traveler, face to face. Moments later, the caravan boss steps up, hoping to diffuse the tension. He holds out a cigarette, attempting to negotiate with the gang leader. But the second he drops Kunieda's name, the lieutenant smacks the smoke right out of his grip, aggressively demanding that every rider be brought. Before the caravan boss can utter a single word of protest, Hana Date ruthlessly slices off one of his ears. Witnessing that gruesome display, absolute terror rips through the crowd. The passengers instantly realize these thugs aren't just playing around. They could all easily end up as ground meat today. As the bleeding boss shrieks in pure agony, Hana Date coldly commands him to freeze. He promises to end him right there on the spot, if he makes even the slightest peep. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoes from the very last transport. Several goons have cornered Rei and are aggressively roughing her up. They rip away her cloak, and the moment they see her stunning face, their eyes gleam like ravenous wolves spotting fresh prey. Desperate Rei screams for Chino to save her, but the coward shrinks into the shadow. Over on the sidelines, Makoto silently analyzes the chaos. Fuyu frantically whispers for him to stay down, reminding him, after all, even a martial master can't outrun flying lead. Putting the pieces together, Makoto figures out these lowlifes belong to the exact same syndicate that ambushed their ride earlier. Out of nowhere, the gentle, elderly woman, the same one Chino accused of being a scammer, steps up to shield Rei. She fearlessly roasts the thugs for bullying a helpless girl. Still struggling, Rei shouts for Chino one more time, loudly reminding him. She also throws it in his face that her father paid him a massive fortune, specifically to keep her safe. Shaking like a leaf, Chino silently begs the heavens for Rei to zip her mouth, terrified she is going to drag him right into the crosshairs. Too late. Hana Date catches every single word. A twisted smirk spreads across his face, utterly amused by the idea of a mystic warrior. Wanting to test out that ridiculous claim, he aims his weapon to see if the guy can catch a bullet. Instantly, Chino drops flat on his knees. Quivering miserably, the pathetic coward screams out the truth. He possesses absolutely zero magical powers. He brutally throws Rei under the bus, claiming she is just making things up. She frantically argues back, repeating that Chino presented himself as a master of the mystical arts. She reveals his promise to guide her to a mythical healer. Snapping aggressively, Chino barks at her to shut her trap, loudly confessing to everyone that he is nothing but to save his own skin. He sells Rei out completely. He tips Hana Date off that she comes from serious money, meaning they could demand a massive ransom for her sake. Rei crumbles emotionally, the harsh reality sinking in. She had been played for an absolute fool this entire time. Hana Date quickly grows bored of this pathetic drama. But then his cold gaze locks on to Makoto. Raising his firearm, he levels the barrel right at Makoto's chest, barking an order for the quiet guy to drop down and beg for mercy. With zero hesitation, the ruthless boss pulls the trigger. Yet Makoto, the crowd scatters in pure terror. But Fuyu does the unthinkable. She lunges directly into the line of fire, throwing her body over Makoto to shield him. Moving faster than Makoto can process, Fuyu takes the brutal hit. A stunned gasp ripples through the survivors, horrified that Hanadate actually tried to end a life. Makoto, however, is completely thrown off. He cannot believe this girl actually threw herself in danger. Just gasping for air, Fuyu forces out her final words, whispering that she had to return the favor. Her eyes tear up as she apologizes for failing her ultimate. But right as she prepares to cross over, Makoto floods her body with healing energy. He gently tells her there is zero chance she is dying on his watch. Fuyu's eyes snap wide open in absolute disbelief as the fatal wound completely vanishes. His aura shifting dramatically, Makoto is officially furious. He steps forward, fully prepared to teach these thugs a brutal lesson. Watching a fatal wound close up leaves Hanadate completely speechless. Realizing he is staring at a genuine immortal master, a twisted maniacal grin stretches across his face. His sick mind wonders what it would feel like to slaughter a living legend. Sadly for him, that arrogant fantasy lasts. Before the boss can squeeze off another round, Makoto moves, glaring down at the pathetic thug. Makoto coldly promises to show him exactly what happens when you cross paths with a true divine warrior. As Hanadate writhes in the dirt, screaming in pure agony, Chino just stares in shock, mind blown that these mythical fighters are actually real. Knowing he is in deep trouble, the scammer decides to quietly slip away before Rei demands some payback. He plans to sprint to the ends of the earth, absolutely terrified that her wealthy family will unleash hell to hunt him down. Hanadate barks at his squad to wipe Makoto out. But before those goons can even twitch, tearing through their ranks like a human tornado. Out of nowhere, a desperate lackey opens fire from a massive battle tank, but Makoto weaves through the hail of bullets like a ghost, and with one devastating strike, he shatters the armored beast, crumbling it to pieces like it was made of cheap plastic toys. The surviving thugs instantly freeze in pure terror, their knees knocking as they stare down a force of nature they have zero chance of beating. Realizing their complete and utter defeat is inevitable, Hanadate's top lieutenant desperately debates whether he needs to unleash their brand new top-secret weapon. But sadly for him, before that desperate thought can fully form in his brain, Makoto materializes right behind him, like a phantom snapping his lights out in a heartbeat. Meanwhile, tucked away in the shadows, Chino lets out a pathetic squeak as the lieutenant's final death cry echoes through the air. Scrambling around Hanadate's out of the blue, his clumsy foot catches on a heavy steel crate, sending him crashing face first into the dirt. Rather than springing right back up to run, his greedy instincts take over, pushing him to crack open. Inside sits a pristine, military-grade rocket launcher, practically begging to be fired. Panic kicks back in, so he slams the lid shut, prioritizing his desperate sprint for survival before death. Yet right as he takes that crucial first step toward freedom, Chino freezes dead in his tracks, his eyes darting back to the heavy crate. Cutting back to the battlefield, the entire army has been completely wiped off the map, leaving only Hanadate shivering in the dust as Makoto stalks. The defeated boss shakes like a leaf, yet he still forces out pathetic air thanks to his insanely powerful connections in the underworld. Makoto does not even blink, his mind just drifting to another arrogant punk who mistakenly thought they could flex on him. Treating the mobster like an annoying bug, Makoto coldly plants his palm flat on Hanadate's forehead, whispering that the guy is just meaningless garbage, right before pulsing raw spiritual energy straight through his skull, ending him instantly. Once the smoke completely clears, Fuyu bounces over to Makoto, while Rei stares from a distance in total disbelief. Honestly, Makoto only cares that their chauffeurs survived the bloodbath, casually waving for Fuyu to hop back inside their ride, so they can finally hit the open highway again. But danger has not completely vanished yet, because up on a ridge, Chino flashes an evil grin while hoisting that massive weapon, locking his sights onto Makoto, out of pure, spiteful jealousy. With zero hesitation, he pulls the trigger, totally convinced that this explosive stunt will make him an absolute legend for single-handedly erasing the so-called invincible master off the face of the earth. The deadly projectile screams through the air straight toward Makoto, but a split second later the idiot's jaw literally unhinges as Makoto glides forward, using his phantom footwork catching the blazing warhead barehanded by wrapping his palms in dense spiritual armor. The crazy truth is, at his current elevated realm of power, this absolute beast could casually shrug off a full-blown tactical missile. Absorbing the brutal kinetic force, without breaking a sweat, he manipulates his glowing aura around the warhead, spinning it in rapid reverse to drastically build up wind drag, allowing his energy-coated grip to completely neutralize the launch. But he isn't just going to drop it in the dirt. Winding up like a major league pitcher, Makoto hurls the massive rocket right back where it came from, and time practically slows down rather than pretending he was some mastermind villain. Too little, too late. The stolen warhead connects, completely vaporizing the foolish sniper in a glorious ball of fire. With the fiery explosion lighting up the background, Fuyu sprints over to inspect Makoto, fussing over his condition like an overprotective mother. He casually waves it off, insisting he only suffered, totally baffled that a guy who literally palmed an explosive warhead is somehow standing there perfectly intact. On the side, the terrified convoy riders are completely losing their minds, aggressively arguing whether they just witnessed real magic or some mind-bending, high. But as the adrenaline crashes, cold dread washes over the group as the terrifying truth hits them. This overpowered, they were nearly butchered on the highway today. Fueled by blind fear, the ungrateful mob instantly gangs up on him, loudly demanding he be kicked to the curb so they do not end up as collateral damage in his next crazy battle. But before the riot can escalate, the head of the transport crew viciously roars at everyone to shut their mouths, making it crystal as Kunieta's close buddy and the guy running this transport. He snaps back, reminding the group they'd all be monster chow right now if Makoto hadn't jumped into the fray. Holding all the cards as the convoy leader, he stubbornly plants his butt on the ground, absolutely refusing to budge an inch until the crowd falls in line. Doing the math and realizing they're backed into a corner, the passenger, one guy even chimes in admitting that having a powerhouse like him as their shield is a massive win. A lone voice still grumbles in the back, but Fuyu steps up with promising absolute protection once they hit Ryuta's streets. She throws out a question. Has anyone here heard of the Bokuto Syndicate? The legendary crew that used to rule the city with nods ripple through the crowd. They all know the current kingpin is the blood heir of the cities. The man pulling the strings is none other than Satoshi, a terrifying figure dubbed the Demon. This guy single-handedly slaughtered the 5 major crime families to reclaim his throne. Smirking, Fuyu drops the ultimate bombshell. No one in the city will dare lay a finger on them, because the terrifying Satoshi is her big brother. Cut to the bustling alleys of Ryuta, where absolute chaos erupts. 2 fiery brothers, Yosuke and Koya, both Bokuto enforcers, are brutally mopping the concrete. Spitting blood, the trashed rivals whine that this market isn't even Bokuto territory. That excuse only pours gasoline on Yosuke's rage. But just as he winds up for a skull-crushing kick, Satoshi, the syndicate boss himself, calmly steps in. With a chillingly quiet voice, he warns the bleeding thugs that hustling without his nod is bad enough, but pushing that is an absolute death sentence. Recognizing the demon himself, the street punks shake like leaves, though one stammers out a desperate threat, claiming untouchable status since they work for the notorious Kamaguchi. Satoshi doesn't even blink. He leans in close, cold. The sheer murderous aura radiating from the boss's eyes shatters the thug's nerves entirely, sending innocent bystanders sprinting away in pure panic. With the trash taken out, Yosuke turns to his boss, visibly worried about Fuyu after 2 solid days of radio silence. Koya immediately snaps at him to shut up before he curses her, and within seconds, the 2 brutes are squabbling like toddlers until Satoshi wedges between them. A warm his little sister is finally home. Pumped up, the 3 gangsters march straight toward the station to roll out the red carpet. Back on the transport, a gentle shake and Fuyu's cheerful voice pull Makoto from his sleep just as the towering walls of Ryuta come into view. She taps his shoulder, explaining that they have to hoof it from here on out, due to strict vehicle bans. Stepping onto the dusty road, Fuyu gestures grandly toward the heavily fortified gates, flashing a warm smile as she welcomes him to her city. Just beyond the checkpoint, armored sentries filter the crowds. Lurking nearby, a sleazy blonde lackey, aggressive, a high-ranking enforcer in Kamaguchi's pocket. Soaking up the cheap flattery, Fumiya arrogantly tells his goons to go wild tonight, promising to cover every single tab. Suddenly the blonde points out Kunieta's arriving crew, and Fumiya's predatory gaze locks instantly onto Rei. While trouble brews, Fuyu casually tosses this batch feels entirely off compared to the pure stuff he looted from the hitman Funaki. It's significantly watered down and clouded with junk. But before he can interrogate her about the murky quality, a commotion steals Fuyu's focus as Fumiya saunters over, looking for blood. The convoy boss steps up, demanding safe passage since their monthly protection bribes are fully paid. Smirking, Fumiya nods but slowly points at Rei, ordering her to stay back for a very personal full-body search. Outraged, the convoy captain steps between them only for Fumiya to mercilessly slam him face first into the dirt. Gasping, Rei drops to her knees to shield the bleeding man, while Fumiya struts around like he owns the pavement. Without missing a beat, he snaps his fingers, ordering his attack dogs, yet Fumiya just laughs in her face. He coldly reminds her that the old boss is 6 feet under, and the Boku. Leaning in with an arrogant sneer, he declares that Ryuda is Kamaguchi's playground now, and her family is nothing but old news. Fuyu stands her ground, reminding the arrogant punk that Satoshi still has their backs. In response, Fumiya just throws his head back and barks out a mocking laugh, sneering that Satoshi would never dare set foot on Kamaguchi turf. But before that smug sentence can even leave his mouth, whoosh! A gleaming katana violently plunges into the dirt, right between his shoes, missing his flesh by mere inches and nearly slicing him in half. A deep, chilling voice echoes from the shadows behind them. It's Satoshi, stepping onto the scene, and coldly demanding to know when Fumiya turned into... The terrifying aura vanishes in a heartbeat. Satoshi's deadly glare instantly melts into a bright, warm smile, as he cheerfully welcomes his little... As the siblings share a heartwarming reunion, Makoto silently analyzes the trio, Satoshi, Yosuke. He deduces that this intense aura must come from consuming a spiritual elixir. Honing his senses, Makoto realizes it's likely Satoshi who wields. Meanwhile, the color has completely drained from Fumiya's face. He stands there shivering like a leaf, completely rattled by his terrifying brush with death, as he desperately tries to mask his fears, screaming at Satoshi for daring to spark a turf war on Kamaguchi's sacred ground. Unbothered, Satoshi casually brushes off the threat. He smoothly explains that he's only here to escort his precious sister home, before closing the distance between them with a predatory stride. Leaning in close, he whispers a bone-chilling promise. He isn't afraid of absolute... Flipping his personality like a switch, Satoshi beams a sunny smile, dropping his own heavy threat and warning the shaking thug to never cross him again. But being humiliated like this only... Swearing bitter vengeance, he instantly rallies his crew, ready to ignite an all-out turf war. Fuyu orders him to stand down. But Fumiya is way too hungry for blood, refusing to let this golden chance to crush Satoshi slip away. As the mob of thugs rushes in, Satoshi remains completely unbothered, popping his blade from its scabbard with a mere flick of his thumb. The heavy hilt slams right into the blonde punk from earlier, knocking him out cold. In a total blur of motion, Satoshi drops several more of Fumiya's goons before they can even... Watching from the sidelines, Makoto analyzes Satoshi's footwork, realizing the swordsman is only tapping into roughly 20% of the Cloud Shadow Step's true velocity. With the cannon fodder cleared out, Satoshi locks his sights on Fumiya for the finishing blow. Suddenly, a heavy wooden cane rockets through the air, heading straight for his skull. He effortlessly parries the flying weapon, unintentionally buying Fumiya another breath of life. Stepping from the shadows is Kamaguchi, the formidable boss of the Kamaguchi faction. He claps slowly, admiring Satoshi's lethal grace. Breathing a massive sigh of relief, Fumiya begs his Don to annihilate Satoshi right here, wiping the Bokuto Society off the map for good. Koya fires back a harsh warning. Sparking a turf war right now will trigger the hungry rival gangs circling Ryuda, threatening to plunge the entire city into absolute chaos. Raising a calm hand, Kamaguchi smoothly diffuses the tension, promising he has absolutely zero interest in painting the streets red. He claims he simply dropped by to offer his sincere Stepping up Kamaguchi's imposing right-hand enforcer, Takagaki barks a firm command to Fumiya and his battered... He commands the grunts to stand down and clear a wide path for Satoshi's squad. Yosuke and Koya exchange totally bewildered looks. Meanwhile, a completely dumbfounded Fumiya desperately questions his boss's unexpected retreat. He frantically argues that letting them walk away unscathed will only inflate the Bakudo Society's already massive egos. Bang, without a single hint of hesitation, Kawaguchi casually blasts a bullet straight through Fumiya's earlobe, delivering a brutal reminder of who. Flashing a cold smirk, Satoshi thanks the Don for his generous hospitality, before leading Fuyu Makoto and his posse out into the night. Watching them walk away, a cold sweat breaks out across Kawaguchi's forehead. The hidden truth. He had actually arrived on the scene 2 minutes ago. His original master plan was to let Fumiya and Satoshi butcher each other. In secret, he had consulted Takagaki about their exact odds of. Takagaki had brutally assessed that without Satoshi in the picture, their win rate sat comfortably at 70%. Tossing Satoshi into the bloody equation dropped those odds to a total coin toss 50%. But the horrifying reality of this exact moment, their odds were plunging way below that mark. This grim statistic completely floored Kawaguchi. With an elite cultivator like Takagaki acting as his shield, their victory should have been practically. Swallowing hard, Takagaki confessed that his heightened spiritual senses were precisely what triggered his intense, overwhelming alarm bells. Shaking like a leaf, the enforcer nodded toward Makoto. He warned that the silent kid tagging along with Fuyu was vastly more terrifying than staring down the barrel of a loaded. Takagaki practically whimpered, admitting that every single survival instinct in his body was screaming at him to stay the hell away from Makoto. Cutting back to the Bokudo Society's gritty headquarters, the crew finally settles in. Fuyu politely points Makoto toward a quiet guest. Sliding a cold drink across the table, Satoshi offers a warm toast, genuinely thanking the mysterious guy for keeping his sister alive on the. Wasting zero time on small talk, Makoto cuts straight to the chase. He produces the glowing vial of spiritual liquid, demanding. He interrogates Satoshi on its true origin. Instantly, the friendly atmosphere evaporates, and Satoshi's expression turns lethal. Realizing that priceless item was. Koya and Yosuke immediately tense up, practically reaching for their weapons. They furiously demand to know how this absolute stranger got his hands on their late boss's sacred heirloom. The heavy tension shatters the moment Fuyu steps in. She confesses she handed it over as a bodyguard fee, considering the potion was completely useless to her. Relaxing his rigid posture, he explains that the mysterious serum was merely a parting gift from their long-lost old man, meaning he hasn't got the absolute faintest clue where that magic. A brief flicker of annoyance crosses Makoto's stoic face. His only solid lead had just slammed into a massive, frustrating dead end. Catching the intense gleam in Makoto's eye, Satoshi quickly connects the dots. Jaws practically hit the floor when Makoto gives a simple nod. Sensing incoming trouble, Fuyu frantically tries to intervene, knowing her battle junkie brother is about. But she's a split second too late. Eyes burning with pure adrenaline, Satoshi practically begs the overpowered youth for a one-on-one sparring match. He confesses he's been chugging that spiritual essence for years, following the exact secret regimen his dad left behind. He's absolutely itching to test his limits, desperate to find out if he actually possesses the latent talent to ascend as a thanks to a massive power spike over the past couple of years. He's totally convinced he's finally crossed the threshold into the supernatural realm. Leaning forward, Satoshi begs for just a brief exchange of blows, desperately needing a real benchmark to measure his newfound power. His old man had strictly forbidden him from walking the dangerous cultivator's path, but Satoshi completely rejects the idea of fading away as a mediocre civilian. Despite the passionate speech, Makoto remains entirely unfazed, coldly shutting him down by stating Satoshi isn't even close to being a real cultivator. Makoto flat out tells Satoshi that he isn't even in his league, advising the guy to go pick a fight with someone closer to his own weight class. He fires off a blunt warning, making it crystal clear that stepping into the ring together will only end with Satoshi broken and bruised. But those words just ignite Satoshi's temper. It drags up painful memories of his old man constantly hammering into his head that he could never stand toe-to-toe with a real cultivator. His father had always pushed him to settle for a painfully mundane life, begging him to stay far away from the brutal realm of cultivation. Right as Makoto turns on his heel to head back to his quarters, Satoshi blocks his path. Desperate, he dangles a massive prize, swearing to reveal the exact all in exchange for a single sparring match. Yosuke and Koya immediately freak out, shouting that the spring's location is a strictly guarded secret. But the fiery resolve in Satoshi's eyes proves there is no turning back. Silence hangs in the air for a tense second before Makoto finally accepts the bargain. Minutes later, Satoshi marches the group straight into a heavily fortified training arena. He practically begs Makoto to unleash his full power, bragging that the facility was engineered to absorb the most catastrophic impacts imaginable. While Satoshi drops into his combat stance, Yosuke and Koya desperately plead for a piece of the action. Satoshi immediately shuts them down, arguing that jumping one guy with a 3-on-1 assault is incredibly dishonorable. Yet Makoto just shrugs it off. With a cocky smirk, he boldly invites all three of them to come at him at the exact same time. The trio freezes, absolutely dumbfounded by his sheer arrogance. Yosuke scoffs, totally convinced that Makoto is just putting up a pathetic tough guy act. Satoshi nervously chuckles, brushing the challenge off as a bad joke, while Fuyu desperately tries to warn the idiots that Makoto is a literal monster walking up. Refusing to listen, Yosuke keeps running his mouth aggressively, boasting that he can flatten Makoto solo. He throws a hand up, signaling Fuyu to start the clock, and arrogantly swears he will wrap up this beatdown in under 5 minutes. Exploding off the starting line, Yosuke rushes in, yet Makoto stands perfectly frozen, like a stone statue, a sight that pushes Yosuke's rage to the boiling point. As the hothead winds up for a devastating first punch, Fuyu just lets out a head, already knowing that Yosuke is about to get completely demolished. In a split second, Makoto's hand shoots out, snatching Yosuke right by the collar, before the strike can even land. The guy is utterly bewildered, but before his brain can even process the glitch, Makoto violently slams him into the ground like a human mop, leaving Satoshi and Koya standing there in absolute shock. Smirking, Makoto calmly counts his first victim. Snapping out of their daze, Satoshi and Koya roar and recklessly launch themselves forward. Stepping right up to be the next sweeping, Koya descends with a vicious aerial assault, while Satoshi sweeps in for a brutal low tackle. But Makoto casually weaves through both lethal strikes, as if he is just strolling, leaving Satoshi completely paralyzed with fear, wondering if this monster is before they can even string together a backup plan. Makoto savagely drives Koya straight into the concrete, instantly following up with a punishing kick that sends Satoshi flying. Off to the side, a battered Yosuke weakly watches the slaughter unfold. His annoyance dusting off his hands, Makoto mockingly invites the bruised trio to take another swing. Refusing to stay down, Satoshi subtly flashes hand signals, coordinating their next desperate maneuver. The second the signal drops, all three fighters explode forward in a synchronized all-out assault, but Makoto casually holds his ground, completely unfazed. Closing the gap, the trio unloads a coordinated barrage from every possible blind spot, absolutely certain this flawlessly timed formation will finally crack his defense. But with a single lazy tap of his foot, Makoto sends a shockwave that literally ruptures the arena floor. Blurring into motion, he delivers a bone-crushing strike to each of them, mercilessly swatting Yosuke and Koya right out of the air. Capitalizing on the chaos, Satoshi darts into the pocket. He pours every ounce of his energy into one massive, decisive blow, certain this will finally topple the Titan. Yet a cold shiver runs down his spine when he realizes Makoto is just staring at the incoming fist with chilling calmness. Throwing his entire soul into the punch, Satoshi lands the hit. He falls back, gasping for air, absolutely convinced his ultimate strike found its mark. But the dust clears to reveal Makoto standing perfectly intact, without a single hair out of place. Bored of the charade, the powerhouse decides it is realizing that playing any longer might actually put these kids in the hospital. The three challengers lie collapsed on the ground, chests violently heaving for air. Staring up at the ceiling, Koya seriously questions if the guy they just fought is even human. Groaning in pain, Yosuke weakly asks Fuyu for the final time. Glancing at the clock, she brutally reveals that Yosuke's ego is completely shattered to realize they're nothing more than measly 1-minute men. Meanwhile, Satoshi stares at his own trembling hands, finally grasping that the colossal gap in their power is literally. He points a shaking finger, highlighting the terrifying fact that Makoto's feet haven't shifted a single inch from his starting position this entire time. Swallowing his pride, Satoshi bows his head and deeply thanks him for showing mercy. In response, Makoto offers a glimmer of hope, stating that Satoshi's raw he goes on to break down the cold is because he still has zero clue how to actually tap into and channel his internal spiritual energy. Still completely shaken, Satoshi hesitantly asks if that display was Makoto going all out. But the dead, chilling silence from Makoto instantly gives him his terror. It dawns on him that this terrifying display might barely scratch the surface of Makoto's actual power. The harsh truth finally hits Satoshi. His old man banned him from the cultivator's path, simply because he lacked the raw strength to survive it. Yosuke stands paralyzed, utterly stunned that Makoto was holding back. Once the dust settles, Makoto turns to Satoshi, demanding the intel they agreed upon. Nodding grimly, Satoshi fishes out a worn stone pendant, claiming his father swore it contained a hidden truth. He admits defeat, confessing that despite his endless tinkering, the relic feels like nothing more than a worthless pebble. But Makoto's eyes instantly lock onto the artifact, identifying it as a highly coveted memory stone. He never dreamed he'd stumble across such a high-tier cultivation technique in this backward realm. Snatching the item, Makoto bluntly states that a normal guy could never crack its seal without channeling spiritual energy. He spells it out for them, officially introducing the relic as a memory stone. With a vicious squeeze, Makoto shatters the rock, unleashing the sheer magical force engulfs the room, dragging everyone. A spectral monk materializes from the glow, and Satoshi's voice cracks as he screams out for his long-lost dad. Makoto coldly shatters that illusion, reminding the boy that he is yelling at a phantom echo. Under his breath, Makoto calculates the immense strength needed to forge this, a feat exclusive to level 4 Grandmasters. A heavy silence falls over the crew as the phantom monk begs whoever found this artifact to show mercy to the pendant's owner. Then he drops a massive bombshell. The legendary spirit spring isn't a myth, it actually exists. However, he strongly warns against hunting it down. This revelation hits Makoto like a truck throwing a massive wrench into his ruthless quest for ultimate power. The holographic figure bows his head, confessing that he served as the sacred spring's sole protector. Yet consumed by his own bitter greed, riddled with guilt, he declares that such godlike anomalies have no place among mortals. That terrifying realization forced him to bury the location forever. Knowing the rumors would inevitably bleed out into the underworld, he recorded this final plea to shield Satoshi and Fuyu from the crossfire. He anticipated his stubborn kids would throw their lives away trying to guard a legacy they didn't understand. Manifesting a glowing key, the Phantom challenges the viewer. If they are truly desperate for the spring, they must seek out his hidden shrine. He swears that every single clue to its exact coordinates is stashed securely inside his personal quarters. As Makoto snatches the ethereal key from the air, the broken father drops to his knees, pleading one last time for his children's safety. The projection suddenly shifts its gaze, delivering a heartbreaking personal farewell, just in case Satoshi was the one to crack the code. Fuyu absolutely loses it, bawling her eyes out, as her dad tearfully apologizes for abandoning them all those years ago, under the flimsy excuse of grabbing milk. He begs his son to abandon this suicidal treasure hunt and just embrace a quiet, normal life alongside his siblings. The holographic aura flickers violently. Right before fading into nothingness, the monk whispers one final desperate apology to Satoshi. The emotional blow shatters the young man completely. Following that gut-wrenching revelation, the family sits paralyzed in the suffocating silence, processing the heavy burden left behind. As the crushing reality of their father's death officially sinks in, Makoto offers a bizarre, awkwardly brutal attempt at a pep talk. Wiping his face, Satoshi extends his gratitude to Makoto, revealing that the sacred shrine sits right in the hometown where he and Fuyu grew. It is a well-kept secret that solely the two of them possess. Fuyu volunteers to lead the expedition at first light, but before they can rest, a violent pounding echoes against their front door. Meanwhile, across town, Fumiya is practically foaming at the mouth over his crushing public humiliation. When his blonde lackey questions their next move, Fumiya erupts, screaming for pure vengeance, to pay for his severed ear and shattered ego. Barking orders, he fiercely demands a burner phone. He dials up a mysterious contact, ordering them to blitz Ryuta immediately because their deadly operation just got pushed up. The voice on the other end stammers, clearly terrified since the whole situation now involves a highly lethal wild card. But Fumiya angrily cuts him off, swearing on his life that he will personally slaughter that obstacle. Deep in the city's underbelly, heavily armed thugs gear up for Fumiya's raid until a sudden, ominous knock strikes their door. A sudden sharp knock echoes from the back door of the Bokutos. The crew jumps, but Makoto instantly shifts into high alert. As the relentless pounding continues, Fuyu is completely wondering who in their right mind would show up at this ungodly hour. Satoshi's mind races, realizing their perimeter guard must have totally dropped the ball against this midnight intruder. Cutting through the tension, Makoto silently cracks the door open, only to freeze. Standing right there in the shadows is Rei. She immediately whispers an apology for the intrusion. Satoshi, drawing a complete blank on who she is, demands to know what she is doing here in the dead of night. Fuyu quickly steps in, reminding him that Rei was actually part of their recent travel crew. But Makoto is caught entirely off guard when Rei locks eyes with him. Her voice cracks as she desperately begs him to save her dying grandfather's life. She pours her heart out, explaining that the old man came down with a mysterious illness right after returning from overseas. Every top-tier doctor they hired was left completely stumped. Even though the symptoms have slightly plateaued, the grim reality is sinking in. He is rapidly running out of time. At this point, only a legendary cultivator can pull him back from the brink. Makoto weighs the option. Sure, it sounds like an easy side hustle to line his pockets, but finding that spiritual spring remains his absolute top priority. Catching his hesitation, Rei makes a desperate move. She thrusts her priceless family heirloom bracelet toward him as collateral. Instantly, Makoto's eyes widen. He recognizes the material immediately. It is crafted from the ultra-rare purple heart vine, a mystical plant that refuses unless the environmental conditions are absolutely flawless. In fact, it only thrives right beside a spiritual spring. While mortals use it to cheat death and extend their lifespan, for cultivators, it is the ultimate cheat code to purify spiritual energy. Makoto realizes this artifact could drastically turbocharge his training. There is just one massive catch. His stash of healing talismans is completely empty, making an immediate rescue impossible. But strictly warns Rei that her grandpa's treatment will have to go on the back burner for a bit. He asks for her digits, swearing to reach out the second he wraps up his own critical mission. Rei accepts the harsh terms and surrenders the bracelet. Makoto intensely examines the relic, quietly plotting to track down its origin point later. After all, wherever this vine grew, a spiritual spring had to be hiding nearby. Once the dust settles, Fuyu turns her attention to Rei's background, remembering Chino dropping hints about her filthy rich pedigree. Rei casually drops a bombshell. Her dad is Zanryu, the powerhouse chairman of the Ryuto conglomerate, a corporate empire sitting comfortably in the global top 5. To make things crazier, the old man handed over 35% of the entire company's shares to his youngest daughter, which is of course Rei herself. Meanwhile, a brutal internal gang war is erupting. Fumiya and his loyal thugs are staging a full-blown mutiny against their boss Kamaguchi. The mob boss, however, doesn't even break a sweat. He coldly mocks Fumiya for daring to bite the hand that feeds him. But Fumiya just lets out a sinister cackle, warning the old man to wake up and read the room. He gleefully brags that his armed men have the entire perimeter locked down. Kamaguchi just smirks, calling him an absolute idiot for thinking sheer numbers equal. The boss arrogantly claims that true strength belongs to him alone. Without missing a beat, he orders his elite enforcer, Takagaki, to slaughter the traitors. Takagaki nods coldly. He slowly slides his katana out from its cane disguise while Fumiya practically begs him to make a move. In a mind-blowing twist, the deadly blade arcs through the air and cleanly slices straight into Kamaguchi's neck, leaving Fumiya completely. Takagaki cruelly taunts the dying boss for being so painfully blind to the real betrayal. Fumiya joins in the sick roasting session. As the fades to black, it finally dawns on Kameguchi that his most trusted right-hand man was the snake in the grass all along. Gasping for answers, the boss demands to know why. In response, Takagaki violently shoves the blood-stained blade straight into his mouth, silencing him forever. The swordsman then bitterly rants about doing all the dirty work, while Kameguchi comfortably played Godfather and hoarded all the massive profits. With the dead weight gone, Fumiya immediately shifts focus, telling Takagaki it is time to march into Satoshi's turf, wipe him off the map, and seize absolute control of the Ryuto Empire. But Takagaki quickly shuts down the hype train, telling him to pump the brakes. He points out a glaring issue. There is a seriously heavy hitter backing Satoshi up from the shadow. Fumiya is totally thrown off. Hearing the cold-blooded Takagaki actually admit fear is unheard of. He nervously asks if they are dealing with another cultivator. Takagaki confirms his worst fears. Satoshi's bodyguard is an insanely overpowered cultivator. Yet a wicked grin crosses his face as he guarantees, but only after his fiercely powerful older brother touches down in the... The ruthless swordsman promises Fumiya that absolutely no one can survive their wrath once he tags in his legendary senior martial brother. Fast forward to the next morning, Fuyu leads Makoto on a grueling mountain hike toward her old man's hidden shrine. But halfway up, she is completely gasping for air, while Makoto barely breaks a sweat, gliding up the treacherous trail like he is casually strolling down a fashion runway. Makoto is absolutely blown away by the ancient temple, tucked deep inside the mountain, completely invisible to the outside world, unless deliberately revealed. Pushing up the steep trail, he calls back for Fuyu to pick up the pace. She groans in frustration, staring daggers at his back, and wondering how this guy is not even breaking through the tree line. They finally arrive. Fuyu immediately collapses onto the dirt, completely wiped out, before gesturing weakly to the very grounds where she and Satoshi spent their childhood. Catching her breath, she reveals her father named it the Yaksha Vidyaraja Temple. A shadow crosses her face as she admits she has not stepped foot here since the day the old man vanished into thin air. Makoto steps across the weathered threshold, instantly hit by a heavy wave of spiritual energy rolling off the ancient walls. Glancing around the secluded space, he quickly pieces it together. Dusting herself off, Fuyu leads him deeper inside, straight into her dad's old living quarters, boasting that she remembers every single inch of this place. Yet looking around, she frowns. She swears she never saw a single lock in this room growing up. Makoto turns the intricate metal key over in his palm, his eyes narrowing. He points out that a key like this, while he inspects the room, Fuyu gets lost in the past, smiling warmly as memories of running around these halls with Satoshi flood her mind. Her voice softens as she shares glimpses of those peaceful, early days spent by her. But as her eyes land on a specific corner, she freezes. She mutters that her dad was paranoid about that fierce wooden statue. Seeing it resting openly on its pedestal sends a chill down her spine. Makoto crosses his arms, immediately sensing something totally off. Pacing around the altar, he questions why a devout man would only keep a single solitary carving of the Vidyaraja. He shoots Fuyu a questioning look. She just shakes her head, totally clueless. Whenever she poked around for answers, her dad would brush her off, obsessively rambling about how worshipping this deity was his one leaning in to inspect the rough woodwork. Fuyu whispers that the old man probably carved the eerie figure with his own two hands. Suddenly Makoto's eyes light up with realization. A smirk crosses his face as he openly applauds her father's raw, hidden power. Without warning, he channels a massive surge of spiritual aura straight into the carving. The air ripples and a shimmering, magically sealed door materializes right out of thin air. Fuyu's jaw practically hits the floor. Makoto casually explains that this phantom barrier was forged entirely out of high-tier spirit artifacts. It is a next-level illusion technique meant to bury secrets. He shakes his head in absolute respect, calling her dad a master refiner. But Fuyu just blinks, totally overwhelmed by this insane magic jargon. Seeing her blank stare, Makoto breaks it down. He reveals that cultivation climbs through specific realms, and crossing from one level to the next takes unbelievable effort. He maps it out, saying stages 1 and 2 are just about building a tough spiritual core. But hitting levels 3 and 4 that unlocks the power to cast real, explosive spells. And anyone who actually breaks into the 5th and 6th tiers, they are practically walking gods. He keeps going, casually dropping facts about brewing mystical pills, carving complex battle arrays, and forging sacred weapons. It is a hidden, mystical underworld that normal, everyday people would not even believe exists. Looking back at the glowing door, Makoto confirms that her father was an absolute beast when it came to forging these rare spiritual tools. But Fuyu is not listening to the lore. She squints at Makoto, her mind racing, wondering how in the world he knows all these ancient secrets. Especially since he literally looks like some... Ignoring her suspicious glare, Makoto slides the mysterious key. The second the ancient mechanism clicks, the wooden statue violently dissolves, melting away like wax in a... Left behind in the puddle is a rusted metal box. They pop it open, finding nothing but a set of geographical coordinates and a battered ancient pen. Makoto runs his fingers over the trinkets, frowning. He points out that they are completely dead, carrying zero traces of spiritual magic. Fuyu whips out her phone, punching in the numbers. She groans, realizing it only highlights a massive, vague patch of wilderness. Still, she turns to Makoto, pointing out that this mystery zone is actually right in their backyard. Makoto makes the call. He is setting up camp right here, to hunt down the legendary spiritual spring hidden within those coordinates. Fuyu volunteers to stick around for a few days to help him clear out the cobwebs, but flashes a playful smirk, practically dragging him out, demanding he take a break with her. Meanwhile, miles away in a pitch-black forest, a terrified little boy tears through the underbrush, desperately fleeing his kidnappers. His tiny, bleeding hands are locked in a death grip around an old, worn... He dives behind a massive oak, just as armed mercenaries crash through the brush. One of the thugs barks out a twisted threat, promising to hurt the kid's sister if he does not surrender. The boy clamps his hands over his mouth, refusing to take the bait. Frustrated, the thugs finally curse and push. As they walk, one mercenary frantically hisses at the other, warning him that they need to bag the kid before their captain finds out he slipped the leash. Once the heavy boots fade into the distance, the boy lets out a shaky breath, finally breaking down into silent, heavy sobs for his capture. Curling into a ball, he closes his eyes tight, desperately praying to the Supreme Being for the strength to survive this nightmare. Make it back to his village. Right then, the amulet resting in his palm begins to pulse with a faint light, looking strikingly identical to the relic Makoto unearthed from that ancient temple lockbox. Miles away, Makoto has been relentlessly hunting for the elusive spiritual spring, relying solely on those cryptic coordinates. But he keeps coming up completely empty-handed. Doubt creeps in, making him second-guess the map and dread the possibility that the sacred oasis might have withered into dust centuries ago. A bone-dry spring spells absolute disaster for him, because it's his one and only shortcut to skyrocketing his cultivation power. Without it, surviving off this world's pathetic, diluted energy would drag out his progress for at least 100 years. And waiting around for a century? Yeah, that's a hard path. While he stands there brainstorming his next move, violently thrashing bushes snap him back to reality, as a breathless little boy bursts through the foliage with heavily armed mercenaries hot on his... Before Makoto can even process why a kid is wandering around this treacherous wilderness, the boy desperately screams for him to watch out. Makoto instantly shifts into a combat-ready stance, right as a squad of hardened thugs swarms the clearing. Assuming Makoto is playing the hero, the lead thug barks a harsh warning to back off, while his buddy casually orders him to just blow Makoto's brains out. Unfazed, Makoto doesn't even flinch. Fuyu had already tipped him off that this entire sector was crawling with trigger-happy goons. A smirking mercenary aims his barrel dead center, prompting the terrified kid to shriek for Makoto to run. But Makoto just stands there, totally bored. In a blinding flash before the firing pin even strikes, Makoto lunges across the distance and clamps his bare hand over the weapon's barrel. The thug freezes, his eyes bulging as his brain short-circuits, terrified that he just picked a fight with a monster. Glaring daggers, Makoto snaps that he is in a horribly foul mood, after a massive wild goose chase, and these armed clowns are just making it worse. With zero effort, Makoto crunches the solid steel rifle into scrap metal like a cheap toy, leaving the goon completely paralyzed with shock. A second thug wildly swings a jagged machete at his head, but Makoto casually deflects it, using a mangled chunk of the destroyed rifle, knocking him out cold. Snatching the dropped blade mid-air, he slices through the remaining two attackers in one fluid, deadly motion. The little boy watches this bloodbath with wide, star-struck eyes. Seeing Makoto obliterate an armed squad without breaking a sweat absolutely proves his sister's legendary tales. Even after wiping out the trash, Makoto's frustration is still boiling over, since he's no closer to finding his target. Having to swat away these pathetic gnats just added insult to injury. Suddenly the kid tugs at his sleeve, vibrating with pure excitement as he asks if Makoto is the mythical heavenly supreme being. His sister had always preached about this invincible, godlike warrior, and after watching that brutal beatdown, the boy knows in his gut that Makoto is the chosen one. Makoto instantly shoots down the grand title, turning his back to brush the kid off. But the kid stubbornly clings to him, revealing that his sister is the revered saintess of Spirit Pond Village. Dropping to his knees, he desperately begs Makoto to rescue her from her vicious kidnappers. Piecing it together, Makoto realizes the same rogue syndicate that was hunting the boy definitely dragged his sister away. Desperate to prove his story, the boy shoves the glowing amulet into view, claiming it's his sister's sacred crest of authority. Legend says the true heavenly supreme being would instantly identify this artifact, and Makoto's eyes immediately lock onto it, recognizing the intricate design. He fishes out his own relic to compare the two, quickly noticing that his personal amulet is significantly more ancient. Catching a glimpse of the older artifact, the boy's hopes skyrockets. This guy is undeniably his savior. Pressing for details, Makoto questions the origin of the crest, and the kid explains it's a sacred heirloom handed down through countless generations of holy maidens. Word is it was originally gifted to them by an actual supreme being. The gears in Makoto's head start turning, wondering if this mysterious deity was actually Fuyu's father. Realizing this hidden village might be sitting right on top of the spiritual spring's secret location, a wave of intense relief washes over him. Knowing his exhausting 3-day trek wasn't a total bust, he strikes a deal to bust the Saintess out of captivity first. Far deep inside a heavily fortified enemy stronghold, the boy's sister, Wan Xin, is strapped in, bracing for a brutal interrogation. For over 1,000 years, her ancestors have guarded the coveted coordinates to the magical oasis, putting a massive target directly on her back. A menacing commander paces in front of her, flashing a cruel smile as he promises she won't be harmed, provided she spills her secrets. His tone turns terrifyingly cold as he demands the exact location of the sacred waters. Fast forward to the next morning, en route to the enemy compound, the anxious kid pesters Makoto, begging to know what his grand tactical rescue strategy is. But Makoto just shrugs coolly, brushing him off by stating they need to actually reach the camp before cooking up any kind of plan. He needed to gauge the syndicate's true firepower, especially given their terrifying level of discipline. Back during his clash in Ryota, he barely managed to catch a live rocket barehanded, and taking that chip damage taught him a valuable lesson. Charging in blindly was no longer an option, especially since this heavily armed faction could be packing far worse artillery. Makoto's racing thoughts snap back to reality when the kid starts whispering about his sister, detailing how she bravely orchestrated his getaway. Moments later, they creep up to a jagged ridge overlooking the sprawling mercenary compound. The boy tugs his sleeve, warning Makoto that pushing any further would instantly blow their cover. With absolute certainty, the kid swears his sister is locked up somewhere down in that fortress. Makoto silently sweeps his gaze across the perimeter, his eyes narrowing as he spots the absurd amount of high-grade military hardware stationed below. Realizing a stealthy infiltration is practically impossible, he decides it's time to play his ace in the hole. Aima's shape-shifting ring. It doesn't take long for a lone guard to wander into a shadowy corner for a smoke break, and Makoto ruthlessly chokes him out in seconds. After dragging the dead weight into the thick brush, he activates the artifact, seamlessly morphing his entire appearance to Makoto smirks at the flawless disguise, though he's mildly annoyed by the ring's one flaw. It demands direct physical contact with the target. Still, he counts his blessings that the item burns 0 spiritual energy. No wonder Imma practically abused this trick on a daily basis. Right on cue, a squad of heavily armed mercs barks out for their missing smoker. Makoto casually steps out of the shadows, flawlessly blending into their ranks. Deep into the night, Makoto casually patrols the compound, his sharp eyes scanning every shadow as he hunts for the captive girl's location. Out of nowhere, a scarred veteran named Captain Fang steps into his path, harshly demanding to know why he's slacking off on duty. The officer barks for his ID badge. Without missing a beat, Makoto flashes it and smoothly lies, claiming he was just hunting for a quiet place to light up. Glancing at the credentials, Captain Fang instantly recognizes the grunt's reputation as a massive chain smoker. His hard glare softens into a stern warning about the strict no-smoking policy inside the perimeter. Makoto nervously chuckles to play along, but the captain brutally cuts him off, making it crystal clear that any rule breaking will earn him an immediate write-up to his commanding officer. But instead of punishing him, Fang orders Makoto to shadow him on his patrol, complaining that they are desperately short on manpower tonight. Makoto eagerly agrees. As they march down the corridor, Captain Fang casually drops a bombshell. Their ruthless boss, Consul Liang, just executed 2 of their own men. Their unforgivable crime, letting a little kid slip right. That bloodbath is exactly why they are pulling every available grunt to lock down the dungeon. A wave of relief washes over Makoto. If they're tightening security, there's a massive chance the pink-haired saint. Right before they breach the heavy iron doors, Fang grips his shoulder, dead serious, warning him to never cross paths with Consul Liang. The terrifying warlord is far from a normal human being. Stepping into the damp prison, Captain Fang won't shut up, dumping unsolicited career advice on how to grind for a battlefield promotion. Out of nowhere, the hardened captain sighs, whispering how much he genuinely feels sick for the miserable captives. Playing the fool, Makoto casually if his heart bleeds for them that much. Fang bitterly scoffs, admitting he's just a pawn who doesn't hold nearly enough power to defy the higher-ups. He tries to brush it off, guessing the captives might survive anyway, since they're strictly being used as political leverage to squeeze the ruling government. But Makoto narrows his eyes. His instincts scream that this massive kidnapping operation hides a much darker motive than just simple ransom. Shaking off the thought, he zeroes in on his primary target, Wan Xin. The runaway boy gave him one crucial clue. His sister rocks incredibly vibrant, naturally pink hair. His eyes dart across the rusted cages, quickly locking onto her fragile figure slumped in the dirt, and his mind immediately races to draft an extraction plan. But before he can bust her out, he desperately needs to silence the chatty Captain Fong. The perfect opening arrives when the veteran kneels down to bandage a bleeding hostage. Makoto silently steps up behind him, ready to snap his neck. Meanwhile, miles away at the quiet temple, Fuyu paces back and forth, consumed by panic. After an agonizing day of total, she desperately tries to calm her nerves, convincing herself that a guy with his monstrous power couldn't possibly bite the dust. Suddenly, the heavy wooden doors creak open. Fuyu's face lights up, expecting her unstoppable hero to walk through, but her heart plummets into her stomach. It's Rei, dragging a bruised and bloody Satoshi whose arm has been completely severed, coughing up blood. Satoshi weakly chokes out that an absolute massacre just went down, wiping out Yosuke and the entire Bokuto street gang. Flashing back to the dungeon, Makoto's killing intent vanishes at the very last second. He lowers his hands. Instead, Makoto crouches down, offering a hand to patch up the battered captive. Thoroughly impressed by the grunt's compassion, Fang pats his back, swearing to put in a glove that will wipe his smoking violation entirely off the official record. Suddenly, the quiet moment shatters. In stomps Fatso, the brutal base commander, who happens to be the younger brother of the infamous Consul Liang. He immediately rips into Captain Fang for slacking on his guard duties. Flustered, the captain stammers out a quick apology. But the moment the commander spots the medical supplies, he realizes Fang has been treating the captives again, and his temper instantly flares. Delivering a vicious backhand that leaves the captain trembling, Fatso barks at him to scram. His greedy eyes then sweep the dark cell, hunting for a fresh plaything. Prowling the shadows, the tyrant bitterly whines that his last victim flatlined way too fast, totally ruining his twisted fun. Desperate Fang steps up. He nervously reminds his boss that dragging off a hostage requires strict clearance from Consul Liang himself. But before the words even leave his mouth, Fatso absolutely clobbers him, sending the bleeding captain crashing to the concrete. Standing over him, the hulking commander snarls, warning Fang. Puffing out his chest, he loudly brags about his unbreakable blood tie to the consul. In his twisted mind, that family name hands him a VIP pass to do whatever the hell. He arrogantly claims he could wipe out the entire cell block of hostages, and absolutely no one would dare lay a finger on him. Bloodied but unbroken Fang stubbornly refuses to yield. Annoyed Fatso snaps his fingers, commanding his goons to beat the captain to a pulp. While his thugs mercilessly stomp on the poor guard, the commander's sinister gaze locks onto Wanshin. A wicked grin creeps across his face, claiming her as his next target. Through bruised ribs and a split lip, the fiercely battered captain still screams in protest, desperate to save her. Right then, the tyrant spots Makoto lingering nearby. He points a heavy finger, ordering him to scram and pull the thick iron door shut on his way out. He shoots him a dark warning. Stay outside, ignore the screaming, and absolutely do not ruin his sick little playtime. Fang chokes out Makoto's name, silently begging him to intervene. But to the captain's absolute horror, Makoto calmly nods, and the commander bursts into a cruel chuckle, totally thrilled by the obedience. He immediately goes back to taunting Fang, but the arrogant commander is totally clueless. Makoto isn't backing down at all, as he casually steps inside and pulls the heavy. Catching the movement, Fatso angrily barks at him to get out. Cold as ice, Makoto completely ignores the threat, calmly sliding the massive deadbolt into place. With terrifying ease, he physically bends the thick metal bolt, permanently sealing the only exit. Now absolutely nobody is leaving. The boss keeps yapping like an angry mutt. When the silent intruder just stares back, Fatso completely loses it, loudly threatening to scatter his brains all over the concrete. Stepping away from the ruined lock, Makoto's voice drops to a deadly whisper. He firmly announces that everyone is trapped. Even with raw, suffocating bloodlust flooding the tiny room, the ignorant commander and his goons just smirk, remaining completely unfazed. The bloated boss arrogantly claims this punk is way out of his league. Unblinking Makoto simply raises a hand, gesturing for them to step up and catch a brutal beatdown. Triggered by the massive disrespect, Fatso's face turns beet red. He screams at his armed lackeys to rip the arrogant intruder to shreds. Stepping up to the plate, an overly cocky guard volunteers to be the first casualty. He confidently asks the boss to sweep things under the rug once he paints the floor with the kid's blood. The commander wildly cheers him on. He flashes a wicked grin, loudly reminding everyone that the almighty Consul Liang shares his exact bloodline. So burying a random nobody in a dark cell won't even cause a tiny ripple. Gripping a combat knife, the brainless grunt lunges straight forward. Makoto simply shifts his weight, effortlessly sidestepping the pathetic strike. In the blink of an eye, before the thug can even process the miss, Makoto grabs him and ruthlessly buries his face straight into the solid rock. Standing over the crushed body, he shoots a deadly glare at the trembling crew.